That helped me make my decision.
All about the curse of the White House.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think this mic is actually on. Can you pick up? There it goes. Can y'all hear me? What about now? Can you hear me projected, or you just hear me because, we're only 10 feet away?
10 feet away.
Okay. So we'll get that where it's a little bit louder. I'm going to go ahead and call this regularly scheduled Planning and Zoning Board of November 6th to order. I have no amendments or changes to the published agenda, so I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda as it was published.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Board Member Naeem, second from Board Member Kathy. Board Member Long is walking in. He'll be joining us in a second. Any comments or questions on the motion on the floor from the dais? Any public comments or questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Could we all please rise for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as it was published?
So moved.
I have a motion from Board Member Naeem. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a second from Board Member Jordan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously, and that's going to take us to our first public hearing and ordinance. This is a request for a small-scale future land use map amendment from residential low density to commercial on 0.28 acres. Mr. Attorney, are you ready to read that ordinance in?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance number 2023-32 CPA 23-11, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, amending ordinance number 4-91 as amended, relating to an amendment of the future land use plan map of the City of Newberry Comprehensive Plan under the expedited amendment procedures established in sections 163.3184 subsections 2 and 3 of the Florida statutes and in conformance with sections 163.3161 through 163.3215 of the Florida statutes, providing for a change in future land use classification from residential low density to commercial on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida. Alachua County tax parcel number is 02173-000-000 on a site consisting of approximately 0.28 acres, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass ordinance number 2023-32, and then it will be on to the City Commission from here.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
And this is first reading, right? Do I have that right?
It is, yes.
First reading.
PCB.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. John Paul, you going to take us through?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the record, I want to make a note of a correction to the ordinance number is 2023-34. I apologize about that misprint. John Paul Perez, City of Newberry Planning and Economic Development. The request before you tonight is a future land use change for the cold storage property just northeast of us. I seem to be having troubles with the clicker. Do I have the ability to request the slide to be advanced? Oh, it's working now. Thank you. All right.
I guess I should have said, you may be a little confused that we're changing what was always a business from residential to a business. But that's because when we found out after they caught fire that it was actually zoned as a residence, not as a business. So maybe a little confusion about that right now.
Thank you. And yes, this image shows the general location of the property within the city limits. And this is an aerial image that shows the site conditions, the subject property being in the black and white outline. I put in arrows for the future two-way one-way pairs, or two-lane one-way pairs, and that Northwest First Avenue will be the westbound traffic, and State Road 26 will turn into the eastbound traffic. Just to, I guess, further emphasize why this land use change is appropriate for the property itself, outside of its non-residential history and use. So the current future land use is residential low density, and the requested land use is commercial. And this shows the context of that residential low-density land use adjacent to City Hall, the commercial corridor of State Road 26, and what will be a high-traffic corridor on Northwest First Ave in the near future. So the proposed will become commercial if recommended for approval and then adopted by the City Commission. As you can see, there's plenty of commercial in the downtown already. The current use and the historic use of the property has been non-residential in nature. This request is simply correcting an error in the land use map to make it appropriate with the current use case and what will be the use case going forward. So. As far as concurrency goes, there is no change of the current use of the property. There is no change in the wastewater currently, as we understand it. Because it's non-residential, it will not generate schools or parks trips. And for that reason, we do find it consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development regulations. We are recommending, the Planning and Zoning Board do recommend approval to the City Commission for this ordinance. As well, if it is recommended for approval this evening, it will be heard on November 27th at City Commission for first reading. Thank you. That completes my presentation.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Not saying anybody did anything wrong. I think back in the day, someone actually did have to live there to keep the fire going all night. That's why it was residential. Okay, if there are no questions from the dais, do I have a motion? I have a motion from Board Member Jordan, second from Board Member Naeem. Any questions on the motion on the floor from the dais? Public comments or questions on the motion on the floor? Come on down, sir. Glad your recovery is going well.
I'm walking,
You are. Looks great.
you know, even though we don't control traffic in this town and I got hit by a truck, I'm walking again.
Walking
Thank you.
again.
So I'm Jeffrey Tate. I live across the street from this property, and I understand it has been miszoned for an extended period of time. Is that correct? And I wonder what the intention is for zoning the other properties along the new one-way thoroughfare, which First Avenue will become, because we have asked about that. I've been told that this was going to be done as a package deal, so I'm a little surprised to see one property singled out for rezoning at this point, when we know the paired one-ways are coming, and the intention is going to be that has been shared with us by city staff, that all properties along that one-way thoroughfare will be zoned commercial. So I have a question about that. The other question I have is about the other parcel on the north and west corner of 254th and First Avenue, which I see is also zoned residential, which is a commercial property. So why is that property not also being rezoned to be properly zoned? It's the AT&T substation. Those are my comments. Thank you.
I can answer the first part. The first part, and we don't normally do questions and answers, but we're a small crowd tonight. That property owner is ready to move forward, and so anybody that lives along there that wants to go ahead and wants to do something, we will, because our plan is to rezone all of First Street commercial at our expense. As long as you stay living there, you'll pay residential taxes, but if the two-way pairs come through and you decide that you want to sell, you can be able to sell at commercial rates. We have moved on that at the speed that FDOT is moving, so it's kind of fell on our back burner because FDOT keeps pushing that date further out. But since this property owner was ready to move forward, so if you and your wife are ready to move forward, we will still rezone it at our expense, but we're not going to do that as a blanket whole until FDOT's timeline gets a little bit clearer. As to the second one, I have no idea if AT&T has got somebody living there like the cold storage did. They stay there all night long, making sure that your cell phones work.
No, Mr. Mayor, it's just one of many anomalies up and down that roadway that are going to be cleared up eventually when we get to the point, as you mentioned, that FDOT has solidified its timeline, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do a blanket project and bring all of it in at the same time, rather than trying to correct things one at a time. The reason for the timing on this one is simply we were going to do the land use and zoning on this property, not the land use, but the zoning on this property, so we wanted to get the whole block cleaned up all at the same time.
All right. So we'll get AT&T paying the right taxes eventually. I know they're on hard times right now. Yes, sir. Any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. That's going to move us on to item 3, which is a quasi-judicial ordinance 2023-33/LDR 23-16. And since we are entering a quasi-judicial procedure, this means that the board will stop being a legislative body and become a judicial board. That means we have to follow certain rules and adhere to a different standard of decision-making. The primary rule we must follow concerns testimony, and the substantial and competent evidence standard must be met when the judicial board makes a decision. This standard states the following, and I quote, all public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into evidence. The giving of opinion testimony is limited to experts. Closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record. I'm going to ask the attorney at this point to read it into the record, the ordinance by title only.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, this is ordinance number 2023-33, LDR 23-16, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, relating to the amendment of the official zoning atlas for this rezoning of 4.29 acres, more or less, pursuant to an application by the City of Newberry, amending the official zoning atlas of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations, providing for rezoning from residential single-family RSF2 and commercial central business districts C-CBD zoning districts to public facilities PF and Commercial Central Business District, C-CBD zoning districts on certain lands within the corporate limits of the city of Newberry, Florida. Alachua County tax parcel numbers are 02173-000-000 and 02174-000-000. Providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion at the appropriate time is to approve, or you can deny or continue to a date certain. Ordinance number 2023-33 as read by title only.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. I'm going to ask you to do double duty tonight. Folks, we got 3 quasi-judicials. If you're here to speak to any of them, let's just go ahead for time and efficiency's sake, stand up and we'll swear in. So if you're here to speak to any item that's under quasi-judicial, if you would, please rise. If you're not sure if you're going to speak, go ahead and rise. We'll swear you in. At least that step will be done. Mr. Attorney, if you would, please swear in all the participants.
Looks like everybody's got their hands raised. Mr. Mayor, do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And usually what we do is go around the room and give your names.
I got names. Everybody.
That away, Janine.
I'm surprised that he's not standing up.
It's true, you did a great job last time. Thank you, everyone. Now, before we begin, we need to disclose any ex parte communications and disclose whether any member of the board had any, physically inspected the property, had any communications with any of the applicants that you want to disclose now. Remember, ex parte is any transmission of information that has bearing or influence on your decision-making. Board Member Polo?
I have none.
Board Member Thomas? Board Member Fairfield?
I have no friends, no.
I have none.
I'm a non-voting mayor, but I have none. None as well.
The best, period. Just don't have my name.
I'm going to explain the order of presentation that we're going to follow for every quasi-judicial item before us tonight. If no one new enters the room, I won't have to do this all over again. If someone new enters, I will have to read all this again. Bear with us. We're going to begin with a staff overview. Then the applicant will have the opportunity to make a presentation with no time limit. Then staff will have the opportunity to make a report and recommendation, also with no time limit. I've not been contacted by anybody wishing to claim a third-party intervener status for any of the quasi-judicials tonight, so that's going to take us to public comment. Any members of the public wishing to speak to this agenda item will have 3 minutes to do so. Then the applicant can cross-examine, staff can cross-examine, then members of the decision-making body may ask questions through the chair of the applicant or the staff. Then we'll hear final arguments. Then the city attorney will advise the decision-making body of applicable law and factual findings that must be made to approve or deny the application. Then we'll enter into deliberations. After deliberations, the motion will be taken to approve the conditions, continue, or deny the application. So let's start with the staff overview. Jean-Paul, you're still on deck?
I am, thank you. Just for the record, I'll be giving presentation. The applicant, who is IS Properties Holdings, or Chris Torrance, hasn't prepared a presentation for this, mainly because the city's taken the lead on this. And this informs the last item. So because we're doing the rezoning for this project is why we felt it appropriate to do the land use at this time as well. So the request before you tonight is to rezone the City Hall property, which you're standing on right now, or sitting on, and the cold storage property. Total, it is 1.93 acres, gross is about 2.8. No residential going there, so that's kind of an arbitrary number unless we're doing FAR, which we will expect to not exceed. Repeat of the image from the last presentation, just showing the built environment around downtown, and to show the appropriateness of the zoning where it's going to be located. And again, like the cold storage property, they were dealing with land use that wasn't really consistent with the use case of the property overall. Same with City Hall. Now, City Hall and government buildings are permitted in these two zoning categories, but as special exceptions. So the city would need to grant itself a special exception in order for something like that to go forward. So we created the public facility zoning district, which is for government uses and for public-private partnerships. And that is what's going to be replacing the zoning that's currently on the City Hall property, which is single-family, where the parking and stormwater management is, and the commercial central business district, where the City Hall and municipal building are. This will all be rezoned to public facilities, as shown on the screen here. And for the cold storage, they're currently zoned single family. We're going to be correcting that and rezoning them to commercial central business district. Later on, hopefully this year, this board will also see the new City Hall site plan, which incorporates both these properties. It is a very harmonious project, so these two will be married well. And as far as just wrapping up the presentation, we are aligning the zoning districts with the existing uses of land. There are no changes nor additional impacts proposed at this time. The City Hall or the cold storage will come before the HARB or the Planning and Zoning Board at the appropriate time we receive a formal application. And with that, I'm just going to conclude my presentation. We do find it consistent with the comprehensive plan, land development regulations. We are recommending the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval to the City Commission. If recommended for approval tonight, it will be heard on November 27th. That completes my presentation.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your conciseness, and I can already see the next state of the city having something about may all projects be harmonious together like that. That was very well put. Okay, so the applicant's waiving the right to make a presentation, so that's going to take us to public comments. Any member of the public wishing to speak to this agenda item has 3 minutes to do so. Seeing none, that's going to take us, did you hear anything that you want to cross-examine? No? You want to cross-examine yourself?
Thank you.
Okay. Members of the making body, do you have any questions? Member Polo.
Mr. Chair, thank you. This is just random for my curiosity. It's 2 parcels right now, is that correct? This lot and the lot right behind?
It's 2 different tax numbers, yeah, for the properties.
Will they be combined at all to make it easier for building, or?
To the best of my knowledge, all development will proceed under the current ownership. So City Hall will still own City Hall, and cold storage will still be owned by IS Property Holdings. So
I wasn't thinking about
yeah.
their property, I was thinking about the 2, because aren't there 2 parcels for this?
There are, yeah. They're already unified under the tax parcel number, so it shows them kind of like 2 different parcels because of the alley that exists between, but that's just the underlay for the overall tax parcel, which includes lots 3 through 5 and 8 through 14. So like the west side of the block and the south side of the block are all owned under 2 different deeds by the city. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
It was not very pertinent, I was just curious.
No,
Thank you.
always good.
It's true.
Any other questions? No? Okay, that's going to take us to final arguments. Would you like to make a final argument? You don't have to. Mr. Attorney, would you please advise decision-making bodies applicable law and factual findings?
The substantial and competent evidence standard.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
We'll now enter into deliberations. If there are no deliberations, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to move to approve.
I have a motion for approval from Board Member Urchin.
Second.
I have a second from Board Member Long. Any comments or questions on the motion on the floor from the board? Public comments or questions on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We're still in quasi-judicial. No one new has entered the room, correct?
Correct.
Perfect. So let's go. Mr. Attorney, would you please read the resolution 2023-55 into the record for us?
Yes, sir. This is a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Newberry, Florida, approving with appropriate conditions and safeguards the preliminary plat of the Magnolia Acres subdivision as authorized under Section 5.16 of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations for a preliminary plat on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida. The tax parcel number is 02545-000-000, consisting of approximately 80 acres, repealing all resolutions in conflict, providing an effective date. Appropriate motion is to pass Resolution 2023-55 upon its reading by title only.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Since I wasn't as clear about the ex parte as I was about the swearing in, I'm going to go ahead and ask it for ex parte again for this quasi and the next quasi. So if do you have any ex parte for any of the quasis left, Member Polo? No? Ms. Kathy? Jordan?
No.
No? Name? Okay, I don't have any. I'm not a voting member, but I don't have any as well. That takes care of the two remaining quasis, and that's going to take us to staff overview. Come on down, Ms. Uma. You can pull that down. There you go. We got it set on Jerry level. You know.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Uma Sarmishta, Planning and Economic Development. This is Resolution 2023-55 SD2310 preliminary plat for Magnolia Acres, generally located south of Southwest 15th Avenue and east of Southwest 222nd Street on approximately 80 acres of land. So this is the area location of where the property is. The parcel number is 02545-000-000. The agent is EDA consultant, and the petition is by RRL Newberry Holding LLC. This is the location of the property. It's on Southwest 15th Avenue. It's the aerial view of the property. So the request is for the preliminary plat for Magnolia Acres subdivision proposed for 15 single-family lot. Minimum acre size is 5 acres per lot. That gives a density of 5.3 acres. It will be a gated community with 400 feet, not 40, sorry, my misspelling there, 400 feet of foot of vegetative buffer there. And I think we have the applicant here, and they will be doing their presentation, and then I will come back for these findings.
Thank you, ma'am. Come on down. Magnolia Acres.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, I'm Clay Sweger with EDA Consultants. I'd like to give you just a brief presentation. This is a preliminary plat application, so it's the first of a few steps with the city. This is a project that is in the ag zoning area of the city along Southwest 15th Avenue. It's just under 80 acres, and the proposed number of lots is 15. The lots range between just over 5 acres in size to almost 7.5. So that's about 1 unit per 5 1/3 acre, which is traditionally what you see in a lot of the rural subdivisions in the city. And that's what is being proposed here. This is the zoning map. As you can see, all the properties in this immediate area are zoned agricultural. This is the preliminary plat, and north is to the left, facing 15th Avenue. There are 15 lots, as I mentioned. There's a 40-foot vegetative buffer, which is nice because this is really, it's an old agricultural field. So there's a nice tree line around the perimeter of the property so those trees can remain and then be in the rear of the lots for added compatibility. As Uma mentioned, this is a proposed subdivision with a gate and with a private road, meaning an HOA would have to own and maintain all of that. There would be very minimal city responsibilities for this subdivision in the form that it's being proposed. So as your staff indicated, we are consistent with the city's code and comprehensive plan for density and lot sizes and setbacks and buffers and so forth, along with the land development code and zoning. So your staff is recommending approval we believe that we put together a plan that does meet all of the regulations for the preliminary plat, and if you do see fit to approve this, it will come back to you again for final plat. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's going to take us to public comment. Any members of the public here to speak to this agenda item tonight? You have 3 minutes to do so. Seeing none, that will take us to cross-examinations. Clay, did you hear anything you want to cross-examine?
No, sir.
Did you hear anything you want to cross-examine? Okay. Members of the board, questions? You have questions of the applicant or staff?
I have a question for the applicant. Seeing the vegetative tree line on Google Earth, I do see that around the buffer area, there's obviously what you stated was that tree line, but I do notice trees inside the property itself. Are you aware of any of them that are in protective status or required to be in protective status? Or is that something that the applicant is planning on making sure that, because
Yeah.
I hear it all the time, and, I see our tree lines going away, and any chance I can, I don't want to sound like a tree hugger, but when it comes to these big neighborhoods, I do want to see more vegetative state. It kind of sucks when you see a whole community come in, wipe out everything that's there, and then you got, something that's planted versus what's the original tree.
Sure. Well, in response to your question, there are 3 areas that have some depressional features, which are actually nice, and those contain a majority of the more clustered tree areas that are on the property, as opposed to everything that's going to be put in the buffer. So those are all set aside, and on the preliminary plat, there's actually a buffer and a setback around there, so the home sites will have areas to build around those, and they'll be retained.
Yeah, because from the maps, like I said, it's pretty cleared out already as it is. It's just, you can see there's certain ones that have not been moved, and I'm wondering if they haven't been moved because they are in protective status.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
those areas should be protected as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? No? Okay, that's going to take us to final arguments. Ms. Umi, you want to make a final argument?
So as we discussed, this is the preliminary plat, and there will be 15 lots. Staff find the request consistent with the City of Newberry Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Regulation. If approved, this petition will be heard on November 27, 2023 by the City Commission, and staff recommend for the approval of Resolution 2023-55 SD 2310. Thank you.
Clay, you want to make a final argument?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Attorney, would you please advise us to make a body, applicable law and factual findings?
Competent and substantial evidence.
Thank you, sir. We'll enter into deliberations. If there are no deliberations, Member Polo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a really quick question. On page 115, this mentions Eden's Garden.
That's a typo, I think. I got it. I saw the email traffic today. That was a typo. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to be any kind of hindrance in the approval.
Yeah, Eden's Garden is in back of Newberry Oaks.
Yeah.
Magnolia Acres, south of 15th? South of 15th? Yeah, south of 15th.
Okay, yeah, I saw that and I just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to cause any
Yep.
issues for anybody.
It did cause some email traffic back and forth today. I don't have any questions either, but I will say, just how much we appreciate a 5-acre division. I think that this is going to be really nice. I think it's what we've been hearing that there is some request for, so it's wonderful to see an application of that come in front of us. If there are no board deliberations, then I'll have a motion.
So moved.
Motion from Naeem, second from Jordan. Comments or questions on the motion on the floor to approve this resolution? Hearing none from the dais. Public comments or questions on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We're still in quasi-judicial. No one new has entered the room. Mr. Attorney, would you please read into the record Resolution 2023-59/SD23-08?
Yes, sir. This is a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Newberry, Florida, approving with appropriate conditions and safeguards the preliminary plat of Phase 1 of Tinklewood Plant Development as authorized under Section 5.16 of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations for a planned development PD zoning district on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida, more particularly described in Exhibit A to the resolution. Repealing all resolutions in conflict, providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass resolution number 2023-59 as read by title only.
Thank you, sir. Now we've done swearing and ex parte, so we'll jump right into that staff overview. Go ahead, John Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The request before the board tonight is a preliminary plat for Phase 1 of the Tanglewood subdivision. This image shows the general location of the property within the city limits. The total area covered by Phase 1 is approximately 50 acres. This image is an aerial showing an approximate layout of Phase 1. This is the location map from the cover of the preliminary plat. I thought it was a good representation of the property limits as well as the Phase 1 limits. Tanglewood is a planned development approved for 636 homes and 150,000 square feet of commercial back in February of this year. This is the next step of the first phase that they're going to be doing, so we're at preliminary plat. The Phase 1 includes 106 homes, has a future commercial phase site, but there's no development proposed for that property yet, as well as an amenity center. The commercial will come back in the form of a site plan for that area, so you'll see that later independently. This image shows the general layout of Phase 1. And as well as phases 2, 3, and 4. This image shows the buffer that's part of the overlay district that will be along State Road 26 as you approach the property. In pink, which kind of looks like brown on this television, is where the commercial site is, that triangle at the north. Also, the main ingress-egress is right there. Which leads to a spine road that connects down to Phase 2. Part of Phase 2 is the water tower that the city's going to be constructing through a grant. Because of that grant, there are some negotiations about timing and who pays for what and what happens when. So staff is asking for an additional condition to allow staff to work out the details of that timing and arrangement independent of this approval to occur sometime after it and hopefully before we see Phase 2. That's it necessarily. The amenity center is where the yellow box is, along with much stormwater. And here's a close-up image of some of the lot and block arrangement for Phase 1. And again, we don't have details that would be desired here because we're at preliminary plat. We're just defining boundaries. We're going to see more details like, what are the intersections going to look like? Is there going to be on-street parking? Where the street tree is going? All that's going to come during construction plan phase. And so that'll be the next submittal. And that'll initially be the kickoff of the final development plan. And that's when we're going to get also examples of what the models will look like, et cetera, et cetera. And so we are at preliminary plat right now. Next is construction plans, final plat. And then they will proceed with site development, which will be moving dirt around and installing all the underground stuff. And then they will go into lot development. So there's a few more approvals that will need to happen before they can start moving some dirt. And then once they do, we'll just be on to the next phase at that point. So you'll start seeing stuff of Phase 2 moving forward. The applicant is here. They don't have a presentation for the board because it's preliminary plat, but they're available for any questions if you'd like to ask now. If not, we'll hold off to deliberations. And so moving on to staff's recommendation, we did find it consistent with the comp plan, land development regulations, as well as the adopting ordinance, and we are recommending approval with the condition on the board before you. This has already been incorporated into the resolution. If the board does recommend approval to the city commission for this preliminary plat, then it will be heard on November 27th. That completes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that's going to move us to public comment. Any members of the public wishing to speak to this agenda item, you have 3 minutes to do so. Come on down, sir.
I'm Paul Hornby. Mr. Mayor, thank you, board. Just a comment, just because I know this thing is kind of well on its way. But I think the discussion on this and the Magnolia previously just really highlights the either a lack of strategy or foresight with the size and scope of these developments. Here we have the Magnolia, which I think is very appropriate given its location, and I'm looking at the urban service map. As it's further out, bigger lots, I think that's how things should work. As you get closer into town, you increase the density, townhomes, apartments, mixed use, all that kind of thing. So here you have this rather large development, you got retail space, and from what I understand, this will be right as you come into Newberry with the new sign that's out on Newberry Road. I'm not sure of that development that's just north of it. Stat mixed-use development, it says the application is in process, but that's another 1,000 homes. So a lot of density, just like this one, more square footage of commercial space, 240,000 square feet. I just don't think, and again, these are on their way, so it's going to happen. I'm just making the comment that here's your sign coming into Newberry, and here are these two massive developments. I just don't think it's a good look for the city that's trying to retain some country charm. That's why people move out here. That's why I've been out here for 35 years. And I'll bring this up with the comp plan workshop too. Again, just trying to, for future developments, if there could be some kind of strategy where you have a tiered approach, that as you get further out, you have bigger lots. Just make it more country-like. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other public comments? Seeing none, that will take us to the applicant. Did you hear anything you want to cross-examine? No? Okay. Member decision-making body. Do you have any questions for the applicant or staff?
I have a question on the plat.
Board member Naeem, is it to the applicant or staff? Or to whoever wants?
I guess whoever wants to answer this. On the slide, I believe on page 149, where we're showing the amenity center and all this, the common area easement, that's 150 feet. Is that correct? Can you give me a little bit more information on what that entails? What are we looking at as far as, is that just going to be blank? Is that, because in front of that easement, you see future commercial area, which I understand as you're driving down Newberry Road, the goal is to have a commercial front versus seeing all these houses, which is much more appreciated than seeing a bunch of houses, so that's awesome. But then I see 150 feet of common area easement before you get into these houses. My concern is, like, is that going to be like a giant parking lot? Is that going to be, is there anything, you see what I'm...
Yeah.
So it looks like it cuts all the way across.
It does.
And then, I don't know how that intertwines with the power lines and whatnot, but my question is, is there any plans for that common area, or is that just going to be a giant grass area?
Great question.
Give me something here.
So, ironically, we did mention Eden's Garden this evening, and not to stir up more conversation about that project, but these are the same Duke Energy regional transmission lines that run through that project. They appear here, and they're going to appear on the project that you heard last Wednesday, the ranch also is bisected or bifurcated by these transmission lines. They are using the easement area to provide some amenities, trails and whatnot. Those trails haven't been fully fleshed out. It is not uncommon for developers to make use of these easement areas underneath these regional transmission lines to do things like golf courses, tennis courts, walking trails, golf cart trails, etc. And that's about all I'm going to add to the question from staff, and if the applicant wants to come up to address the question a bit further, they can do so. Thanks, sir.
Come on down, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. I just wanted to essentially agree with what John Paul was saying.
Can you give us your name for the record?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Walker Owen with CHW. I'm a project manager of this project and a licensed civil engineer in the state of Florida. So like John Paul was saying, this area will include walking trails and amenities in that, walking trail amenities, essentially, in that area. Yeah.
It's a strange area to do something with, but you got to
It
do
is a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just, like I said, like, we've had some hiccups in the past with, like, common area easements, and I just want to make sure that we're getting that and taken care of now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then while I got you, I see the plat. And as I'm putting them together with Google Earth, same question that I had for Magnolia. It is a field that used to be planted watermelon. And if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago, we had that issue where a bunch of watermelon got destroyed in that field. But the trees that are currently there that I've noticed, even when you drive by, there's beautiful old trees that are older than our grandparents. But in this plat, I don't see any kind of design for the trees that are currently there. Is there any plans for it, or is this just going to be a scraped down complete?
So there is a 50-foot buffer proposed along the west boundary of the project. So anything that's there that was able to be kept could be kept.
Okay.
The details of that will be worked out in a construction drawing, so we don't have details of it currently.
Okay.
I would say for the most part, the trees on the interior of their site will be removed.
Other board questions? Member Polo.
I'm not sure if this is for staff or applicant, but are there any measures in place, and this probably predates me, so pardon me, are there any measures in place for traffic safety with this 600, eventually 600 and something homes emptying out onto Newberry Road?
Safety for the mixture of pedestrian and vehicular traffic, or?
If I'm imagining where this is correctly, it's 65. Or 60, okay, so I drive 65, my bad.
Yeah, so?
You're coming with friends. You're coming out over a hill, so the visibility is pretty limited. So that's why I'm just making sure, because that intersection can already be kind of hairy, especially given the insane volume that's coming in through that way into Gainesville.
Yeah, great question. So we engaged with CHW, Ryan Thompson, who's here today, about their plans for the intersection, and I think that there are preliminary conversations with FDOT because we were asking for left-hand turn movements here, and it's a 60-mile-per-hour zone, which means that there needs to be a lot of lead-up to any sort of intersection of that traffic. They would prefer a right out and a right in. That way people are using the roundabout at 202 to make left-hand turn movements, opposed to having some sort of temporary measure in place that would create an opportunity for a crash to occur. So that's ultimately out of our hands because it's subject to the state access management standards, but we did inquire about there being improvements to that primary ingress egress. And the conversation hasn't gone further from that point. So to the best of our understanding, it's going to be right in, right out. And all throughout the development, for any stretches over 500 feet, there are on-street parking requirements that are adequate. So like in Newberry Oaks, those came in afterwards, and so it's really tight on those streets where this will be designed into the streets. On-street parking, chicanes, and other elements should help promote some sort of traffic calming within the development, within the subdivision. But yeah, that point of ingress egress, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to the FDOT permit site part of the development review process. And just a question for Ryan Thomas, if they've had additional conversations with FDOT about access to the site yet, and he shook his head no for the record. So nothing new to report yet, but we'll make it a point before we come it'll have to be in the design for the construction plans, so we'll see what that looks like ultimately. If they stick with the right in, right out, or allow left-hand movements.
A follow-up question to that, if I may. When these other phases are being added on, and we reach that 600 and something homes,
Yes.
is there only going to be that one ride in, one ride out, or will there be another exit or entrance for the neighborhood?
Another great question. There's going to be another ingress egress on State Road 26, a little bit further east, as well as an access on 202. There are some triggers for that access on 202, which is prior to commencement of Phase 4. They need to put that in, that connection to 202, as well as some improvements on 202 that will occur, which may mean, and this is for the board, removal of some of that tree line along Southwest 202 Street. So that some of that tree line may go away with the improvement of that road. You will end up with a better road, but you may lose some of that canopy that currently shades it.
Because that's just a tarmac, non-lined road, right?
Currently, it's a chip-sealed road.
Chip seal, okay.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Which is a maintenance,
Not dirt.
yeah, it's not a good place to put your money.
For the record, though, and when we voted on this, CHW said they were going to start planting new oak trees along the road to recreate the canopy, and those oak trees would grow in conjunction with. So just to make sure we know, because we did talk about 202 and whether it had to be paved and the canopy and the nice country road, and CHW said, yeah, since we'll know the phasing that we're working on, we can begin planting those trees, so you will still have that nice 202 road, and it'll have some improvements too. So I just want to make sure we're all repeating the same that were agreed upon, because we talked about this one an awful lot when it got rezoned. I mean, how are we going to do work 202? How are we going to come in? How are we going to come out? To
further that point, a lot of the inventory, Jamie Jones with Public Works did an unofficial inventory of that, and it's mostly water or laurel oaks along there, so it's just a matter of a couple of years before a lot of those start coming down or just dropping branches to the point where people start, complaining about them, and they come down naturally or unnaturally.
Other board questions? Jordan.
I was going to say something to piggyback off your question. It's in my experience in construction development, a right in, right out, like JP was saying, is a very common practice for that particular spot. Given the traffic and given the miles per hour there, I would be surprised if they switch it and allow a left hand. They'll almost always be, just for safety purposes, a right in, right out.
And to address the speed issue, FDOT designs highways, so I'm sure that they'll take into account a lot of those things. And it's usually the complaint about FDOT is that they design for highways and then they put it in small downtowns, and so you have like these massive things that kind of encourage a driver to speed, but in this particular case it'll be appropriate. And there will more than likely be substantial deceleration lanes, so the folks that are turning in do have an opportunity to not slam on their brakes or hit their brakes, to cause, uncontrolled maneuvers of other drivers. So, thank you.
Just a comment, there's a faith of FDOT that we even said that we'll give them money for a traffic light on 15th Avenue and US 27, and they denied us. So I don't have a lot of faith in FDOT, and Mike New will probably hate me for saying that, but it's the truth. My concern with the traffic is how many houses does the current property behind Canterbury have? Do you know? It's like 300? Does that sound accurate? Where Canterbury is?
330?
330? And then the property across where DCC is plotted for,
Is this gonna be about the plat?
no, it's gonna be about the roadway.
Okay, but I'm just making sure,
I'm just
remember,
trying to
today,
figure-
we're just talking about the plat. We
Right,
had all these
I'm just-
conversations before,
Yeah.
so just bring it back, finish this quantum.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, like, so I can, in my mind,
Yeah.
justification of,
So DCC is close to SAP. It's west of it.
yeah, I don't
SAP
mean
is-
DCC itself, I'm saying the property that's been established, that we've zoned.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many houses that was? Wasn't that close to 1,000?
Mr. Chair, there is an application that was tendered almost 2 years ago now.
Right.
It's on hold
Okay.
and has not been approved for anything yet.
Okay. That's just because that's more FDOT issues that I'm just, but, sorry. We'll go back to the plat.
Jordan?
I move to accept.
I still had,
Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on one second. We'll get there. We're in the
I
middle
had
of it.
questions.
Go ahead, Miss Kathy.
I'm catching up, I
Yes.
think. This is, how many houses in phase one?
106.
On Highway 26?
Yes.
And then that's in how many years?
This is phase one, so they didn't have I don't think they had a timed phasing plan. It's at the pace of construction. Gary Weisman, who is the developer, is here. He can probably give you a good estimate as to when he
I know
plans on
somebody's
putting
probably
the
already
roof on
said
the
this, I'm just
106
trying to
home.
catch up.
Yeah.
I'm sure this has already been, so phase one is 100, how many houses in total?
636. Started at 750, they came down to 636.
On Highway 26, that
Yes.
big. And in how many years?
The ultimate build-out will probably be determined by market forces. So if there's a continued demand for housing, and people are interested in
Just
moving
keep
in
going.
Newberry, it'll probably continue to build out at a steady pace. Yeah, the Tanglewood subdivision I'm
I
referring
just
to.
think we have these questions because this.
We haven't been,
predates us.
yeah, I knew
Yeah.
it was, something was, I knew, because
Yeah.
that's our family in that area. So
Gotcha.
I knew something was, but I didn't realize the scope of it. And I won't talk anymore about it because my concern is always the traffic on that road. It took me probably a good 5 minutes to get out on the road tonight.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
live right down from there.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page, and I won't ask about traffic because I know how that is, so.
So is there
I'm
any
good.
way,
I'm
is
good.
there any way we can get an?
Hang on one second. Hang on.
that'll
Let's-
come
let's
later,
bring the
right?
order back. Well, it's actually already
That'll come
gone
later?
past, right? So when we did the rezoning and the approval, that's when we had lots of conversations, and I understand the tension. And it is always playing catch-up, right? Because from FDOT standpoint, there's lots of capacity on that road, and those
Yeah,
triggers for a
right.
stoplight won't happen for a long time. But the item in front of us tonight is just the plat.
Right, that's
and
why I
how it's
said, no,
laid
no,
out
I'll leave traffic
tonight.
out of it
So,
for tonight.
are there any more questions on
Nope.
the plat? Naeem?
I wanna address Kathy's comment, and I wanna strengthen that, is the plat right now is for 107.
Mhm.
But from what we've heard is, we don't know how many they're gonna build in a year, 2 years, 3 years. Any kind of estimate. Once this gets approved, and it goes through all the phases, and they start breaking ground, are they planning on building 100 homes in a year? And then we're going to phase 2, or are they planning on building 20 homes a year? Because a small hometown builder can, obviously if you're not to a giant size, can, insurance-wise, I'm thinking, I like a builder's risk where it's 15 homes a year, because the builder is actually active on the site. When you start getting into the higher numbers, it becomes a little bit, it's not scary, it's just a little bit out of the scope.
Yeah.
So I respect this builder a lot. I've seen the quality and marksmanship of his homes. I'm just kind of like, is this all gonna be 100 homes in less than a year, once it gets approved?
Yeah, also,
So, and I think Kathy was,
That's
that's
what
what
my
Kathy was
question
really
was.
trying to get
Yeah.
to is, what are we looking at for these
Yeah.
100 homes? Is
Yeah.
this gonna be a one-year project? Is this gonna be a 5-year project? I
Yeah.
mean,
I'm going to defer to the applicant and Gary Weisman. He happens to be here as well, so both.
Gary, did you bring your crystal ball with you? Because that's what we're asking
We
here.
also have other questions if you've got your crystal ball.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, my name's Gary Weisman. I'm the developer, and we don't have a crystal ball,
No.
and market forces will obviously control what we do, but we do everything as a family. I've got 2 sons that also build, and we're anticipating doing the building there. And if I had to guess, I'd say 40 to 60 houses a year, maybe. So, but I don't want to commit and promise anything because none of us know what's going to happen.
but with the way the market moves, I can respect that and I understand that. Sometimes, you're in a market where there's only 10 homes this year, and then you got a market that's, I just want to know, like, if the market's great, everything's moving really smoothly, like it's been, and you said 40 to 60 homes, that's, you're giving us a ballpark. It's not, we're not going to hold you to it. We just kind of want to have an idea.
Well, I've been there. We've done 10 homes a year, but
Right.
we've never done 100 homes a year. So even if it's a good market, I think we're still looking at 40 to 60.
And I stand by what I said. I've seen some of your homes, and I enjoy looking at your marksmanship, and
Appreciate your
it's- so,
support.
Thank you.
And just so the board knows that the triggers happen by phases. So once phase 1 happens, all the other improvements have to happen, right? So if he builds out phase 1, that triggers the other things that he's agreed to back when we did the rezoning application. Any other questions about the plat? If the board doesn't have one, I have one, and it's probably to John Paul. John Paul, our overlay district, tell me how deep does the overlay district along 24, or along 26, how deep does it go into? I know it covers the commercial. Does it also cover some of the residential, or does it pretty much end where the commercial is?
So, yeah, the overlay district, there's different components to it. There's that landscape buffer. Is that what you're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I just, for the audiences, right, we often hear, well, we're not doing this in a strategic or responsible way.
Yeah.
I disagree with that, but I'm curious, because we've got the 202 is the urban services area, which the public said that's where they wanted it. We've got the overlay district to keep that gateway attractive. It's got a higher level of building, nicer buildings, those kinds of things. And I just can't remember off the top of my head how many feet the overlay district goes back.
Yeah.
Is it done by a foot or is it done by a type? I know it covers the commercial.
If you're within 500 feet of the right-of-way, State Road 26 and US 41, you're in the overlay.
Okay.
And then that overlay is broken up into different zones. Zone 1 being the downtown area, Zone 2 as you get further out, and Zone 3. With each zone going up, you have an increased number of linear feet you need to provide for a landscape buffer at the beginning of your property, closest to the street. And my memory is also failing me. I don't know if it's 35 or 50 feet in this area, but this is towards Zone 3, so it would be the greatest landscape buffer they'd have to provide in this area. Fortunately, the way that they've laid out the property, they've done us one better. They put the stormwater up there, and then there's the Duke Energy, and then the commercial is something that you would want to have on the street anyway. I can't imagine any sort of real estate broker selling a commercial property not on a main thoroughfare. But yeah, so there's a lot at play with buffering and protecting that scenic view. Of course, you're not going to have a field to look out on, but there is going to be that buffer there to provide some sort of greening and softening of the edges. So you're not looking at the back of homes, you're not looking at fences of neighborhoods. You're going to be seeing a smaller representation of what's there today, a large storm water and some very nice landscaping.
And just for future reference, every development that comes along that corridor in the overlay district, I'm going to ask that question just so that we all remember the years of strategic planning that went into creating how we are going to grow and how we're going to move into the future, because that has been years of workshops to do that. Any other questions from the board? Okay, that takes us to final arguments. Did you want to make a final argument, sir? You don't have to. John Paul, do you want to make a final argument? All right, Mr. Attorney, would you please advise decision-making bodies applicable law and factual findings?
Substantial and competent, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We'll enter into deliberations. And remember, we're just deliberating on the plat at this point. So the layout that they put, the buffering there at the front, those kinds of things, that's what's in front of you tonight. Any more deliberations? Naeem?
So my question is going to come to the school on the plat. There's no school in the plat, but it has to do, sorry. But something brought to my attention to look up the proposed school zone, even though it's not voted on yet. So my concern is, I have it up on the proposed one, and it's like they're proposing Newberry Elementary School. It's like zigzagged right through the middle of this property. It doesn't go cut right through 202. If this was like on 202, I wouldn't be so concerned. My thing is, I'm kind of like nervous because some of these people that would come here might have to go to Archer, might have to go to Newberry Elementary. I mean, I know that's not something that is controlled by the builder, but I think it's something that we need to, I don't want to be not on record, at least bringing this up as a concern, because the school board is looking at splitting this property down the middle. And it might be actually even in phase one, that maybe one or two houses are in Archer and the next door neighbor's going to Newberry. I don't think you might have an answer for helping on that. I just want to be on the record to.
The rezoning maps at this point are proposed from the school board. We'll reach out to Suzanne Nguyen, the school board planner that we coordinate with, with concurrency and whatnot, let her know that this is a single cohesive development, and just emphasize that, it'd be nice to not have neighbors' kids go to two different schools.
And John Paul, I've been assured by 3 school board members that they're not going to cut this deep into Newberry. I've been clear about our urban services area. I've told Suzanne, I've told her to look at the urban service area. I know the maps are still up there, but they're still in their conversations. Sounds to me like they're going to push that on, and I don't know that we can, if the maps were set, then I think they become fair game for us, but maps that are still
proposed,
actively being changed right now, make it difficult for us to make decisions on them, but I agree.
I just want to protect, I want to protect the builder on this one, because a lot of people, let's face it, they move to Newberry, really, because schools are the best here. And I stand very prideful on that. We have the best teachers and best staff.
You got something on your nose, sir.
But my fear would be like half of this gets built and then the other half is zoned for another school, and the builder's sitting like, why aren't these really moving? And it's.
Absolutely. If it's okay with the board and the mayor, we'll go ahead and just send a courtesy email on behalf of the board, just reminding them that this is a single development in this area, that any plans to split the neighborhood would be undesirable by the city.
Okay. We're still in deliberations. Are there any more deliberations? Hearing no deliberations, then I'll have a motion. I have a motion from Board Member Long. Do I have a second? I have a second from Board Member Fairfield. Any comments or questions on the motion on the floor from the dais? Public comments or questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. That moves us to topics for member discussion. Remember, we have a workshop right after this. You got any topics, Board Member Polo?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, I have 3 very short things. Number 1, I wanted to let the public know that the Newberry High School girls tennis team and the Newberry High School boys lacrosse team are in search of sponsors. So if you're interested in having an amazing banner up at one of these events and get shout outs from us constantly, please let me know, because I'd be very glad to facilitate that for you. Actually, I combined 2 things into one, so I only have 2 things. Number 2, I wanted to just let everybody know that we have a new emergency vet clinic opening in Trenton. Since it's so close to us, it might be quicker to get there with your pet if you have an emergency, as opposed to going into Gainesville to Blue Pro, because we all know what the traffic is like on the way into Gainesville. So just wanted to let the public know that those 2 things are happening.
Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. Miss Kathy? Jordan? No? Lane?
All right, we got some busy days coming up in Newberry here in November. So November, I want to remind everybody, November 17th and the 18th, we have, I believe this is our 6th annual rodeo being held in country. Yeah, it says 6th annual. I had to take a double look. I was like, dang. So 17th and 18th, tickets are on sale now. I believe you can get them at Countryway Town Center, or if you go online, you can purchase them online. It's a great family event. Kids love it. Families love it. Also on the 18th, I want to remind everybody the Fall Festival, Newberry Main Street Fall Festival will be taking place from 9 to 4. So before you go crazy at the rodeo, go buy some stuff at the vendors, hang out, take a walk down our main street. There's some great little shops in town. Good stuff coming up. And Christmas season's coming. This is all leading to Christmas season, but we'll stick to fall for right now and get through this part.
Well, let's do one Christmas announcement because it'll happen before we meet again. December 2nd is the tree lighting ceremony and the vintage market. And I believe the vintage market is going to try to do the Friday night and the Saturday again. I'm not 100% on that, but I know that they're going to be there for the tree lighting ceremony. So do the fall festival on the 18th, hit the rodeo either the 17th or the 18th, but make sure you come downtown on December 2nd for the tree lighting. That'll be great. We'll have a market going. We'll have some hot cocoa again and cookies. Santa will be there. And we got a couple of surprises because you got to have a surprise when you're making Newberry the Christmas capital of Alachua County. And then all Florida, right? And then we'll do all the rest of the Christmas announcements unless Miss Kathy wants to announce the parade over again.
Oh, I was trying to be respectful of Thanksgiving, but yeah, I'll go ahead and.
Well, we got to fill in the calendars, yeah.
Well, the theme is gingerbread this year, and it's Whoville gingerbread. So I don't know why I keep saying we. I am going to partner with the city every year to establish this gingerbread capital thing we're going for Christmas. So the city is going to do gingerbread, and we're going to have different themes every year for the parade for gingerbread houses, and this year just happens to be Whoville houses. So imagination comes into play. Who knows what's going to be there? But everybody's invited to be in the parade. If you want to be in the parade, all you need to do is just let me know. You can message me on different social media, or just in passing, just say, hey, we're going to show up. Years ago, I stopped doing registration or numbers because I know nobody's going to believe this, but in this community, people just tend to not follow those rules and show up. So I decided that we would just take everybody. And I just fly by the seat of my pants and put everybody in line and we go.
Chaos.
It works well. I love chaos, so that suits me to the T. But if you show up at the last minute, you're good to go. So whatever, boats, trains, golf carts.
There is one rule though.
What? No.
There's only one
Santa.
Okay.
And it's not yours.
Yeah.
Right. That's all I ask, because every year I get so inundated with so many people complaining about more than one Santa. One Santa. I very seldom have any rules about anything I'm doing. I just like to have fun, but when there's other Santas, I can feel the heat on my face when they come line up. I'm like, oh, I can hear about this for 3 months. At least 3 months, every time I go anywhere.
Just bring a change of clothes for them.
Yeah. Why was there another Santa?
And then after the
Just showed
parade,
up.
which is on the 16th, right?
Yep,
16th?
the Christmas festival at
Everybody go
Countryway.
down to the town center for the Christmas festival. That'll end the city-sponsored festivities. But every weekend during December and at the next PNC meeting, we'll go in greater detail about all the weekends. But we got a whole host of activities. Can't wait to see which department
Yeah.
wins the Christmas light contest
The
this
Christmas
year.
festival is great,
Yeah.
really great too,
So-
with lots of vendors. It's free to the
Yeah.
public, and
Good stuff.
Santa's there. One
Yep.
Santa.
Yep.
The Santa is there.
The Santa is there, right? And the Santa will be at the tree
Yes.
lighting ceremony as well. So Newberry does Christmas up. So that takes us through Thanksgiving until we meet again. Public announcements. Public comments? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Does anybody need a bio break? We'll take a 5-minute bio break and then we'll go into the workshop. Are we ready to get going? We're back live. Okay, let's go ahead and call this Comprehensive Plan Amendment Update Workshop to order. And Brian, I think that we're just receiving a presentation tonight because we didn't get any backup material. Is that right?
That's correct.
Just clarify that for our.
Two presentations, one from staff and one from the consultant.
Okay, so with that, I will ask for an approval of the agenda as it was published. I have a motion from Jordan.
Second.
Second from Donald. Any comments, questions, motion on the floor from the dais? Public comments, questions, motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. Brian, take us away. Comprehensive Plan Amendment Update. So excited.
Popcorn.
Can you?
Popcorn?
Yeah.
Next.
We forgot. Thank you, Mr. Weir. So we're going to go a little bit out of order in terms of the numbering of the elements of the comprehensive plan. We have 11 elements in our comp plan, 8 of which are prescribed and the others are optional. And so staff is actually working on some of the items, and I'll go through those first, and then we'll save the meat of the presentation for our consultant, CHW, who's doing 3 of the bigger elements and doing all the heavy lifting with us on that. So. Just timeline, we've revised the timeline based on where we're currently at. So right now, we are at the November 6th, obviously, Planning and Zoning Board workshop on the development. So far, we've had 2 public open houses. The first one was very well attended, got a lot of really good input. A consultant's got a lot of public input on that. It had a second one follow up and didn't have quite as much response. It was a little bit less, but still did have some good input. Next step after tonight will be a workshop for the commission. So the consultants will take what they've gotten from the public input and from staff, and including your comments, boil that all down, put it into the revised presentation for the city commission on the 28th. And then we'll move forward where they eventually get to an actual draft that'll be heard by the city commission on first read. Planning and zoning will hear it first in actual draft form. And then assuming the planning and zoning board recommends approval to move forward, then it'll go to the city commission for first reading. Ultimately being transmitted to the state, where we wait for 45 to 60 days for their response. And then ultimately, once that returns, assuming there's not too much in the way of comments from the different state agencies that do their review, then it will put it back into final draft form, and the commission will hear it on second reading and for enactment. And that will, projecting right now to be May 27th, and then transmittal to the state. I don't remember the applause being in there.
You got me. I'll tell you.
Got me too.
Did that alarm just go off?
Transmittal to the state on June 1st. And then we'll turn around and immediately begin the LDR, the Land Development Regulation overhaul. So, as I said, we have 11 elements in our comprehensive plan. The first 3, future land use, traffic, circulation, housing, those are kind of the big ones in the comprehensive plan that take the most work. And we've contracted with CHW to help us with those amendments. The sanitary sewer, solid waste drainage, the utilities related. The utilities director has gone through those and staff and have decided that they didn't really see any changes necessary there. Staff is working conservation, recreation, open space, and intergovernmental coordination. Minor tweaks. Most of those are actually in pretty good shape. Just a lot of reference, updating to a little bit more modern language, or deleting references that are no longer pertinent. That were embedded in there. Capital improvements, no change, and then economic development staff's also making some suggestions for that. The school facilities element, that's worked out through interlocal agreement with the school board and all the other communities in Alachua County, so there's no changes to that until they come back and do their 5-year updates. And then the property rights element, we just recently passed that. The City of Newberry's property rights element just mirrors exactly what the state requires. And so we didn't make any additions to it. We just went straight with what the state requirement was, and so there's no changes necessary there. So just briefly, recreation and open space, some changes staff is recommending. Under our current code, the level of service standards, they're not really based on a particular standard. Open space requirements standard, we're recommending maybe a little bit of a tweak there in terms of the amount of the open space that would be required in a planned development and mixed use. And then missing some goals and objectives. We think they're modern, current day comprehensive plans include a couple of goals that we thought might be interesting for the community to adopt. So the proposed updates base our level of service requirements for the recreation facilities on the current National Recreation and Park Association standards. So it's an actual published standard that we can reference rather than just kind of haphazardly deciding on the fly what the standard should be.
And Brian, because we don't do a whole lot of workshops. Workshops are a whole lot less formal than commission meetings. So if you have questions, comments, thoughts, don't try to just jump out, right? Let's talk about them as we go, because you won't remember it's getting late in the night by the end of the night, right? So ask it when you see it, because this is a big deal, right? When we amend our comp plan, the comp plan is our guiding document. The land development regulations are then modified based on what we say in that guiding document. So we got the city charter, then you have your comp plan. So this is the big idea, big picture. How do you want the town to grow? How do you want the town to look? How do you want it to feel? So this is part of that responsible strategic growth. Let's go back to the comp plans. Let's make sure it's still guiding us in the direction we think we want to go.
Yes, sir.
Take it on.
And some of the work that our consultant is working on with those other elements is a result of the workshops that we had last year, the public workshops on the visioning. And so that's been incorporated as well. Let's see. Policy update on provisions of the recreation open space. What that's referring to is currently there's I believe a 15% minimum recreation open space requirement, say in a planned development or a mixed use. A lot of that is usually taken up is allowed currently to be taken up in stormwater basins for passive recreation. And so one of the recommendations would be to revisit that and say, well, maybe we put a limit on how much of the stormwater basin can be counted towards your 15% or 20% overall open space. Common area and open space in a PD or in a mixed use.
Brian, tell us how, if we did that, how would that have affected the application that we saw tonight? Because they're using the Duke
Right.
easement as part of the open space.
That one's kind of unique because they do have that feature, which is going to provide a lot of open area for something akin to a linear park. Most developments wouldn't have that. So that development, just by the nature of having that in there, is going to have more than the average open space because they're also going to provide the other 15% minimum requirement open.
It's always seemed disingenuous to me that we let developers use stormwater because we say, don't let your kids play there. Right. It's not recreation, right? But then the developer
and we
gets
fence
to
off
count
some
it.
of them if sinkholes open up, which is unfortunately something that happens in some of the stormwater bases. We fence them off so that they can't play in them.
Right.
So, yeah.
But the developer gets to use it to count, but we are actively saying it doesn't count. So, I mean, I love having the stormwater up against the road. I love pushing the developments back. I think that helps in our overlay district. But I think this is a good question to ask because when you guys say open space, I doubt you are thinking stormwater. You're thinking green area that you can have hiking in, those kinds of things, right? And through a loophole, right, you get to use the stormwater as part of that, which means that there really isn't as much walking, hiking,
Well, you're not supposed to be in them.
Correct.
So why are they being able to use them?
Mr. Mayor, a lot of times they are, again, if you don't have a stormwater facility that is prone to sinkhole activity, it's a place where you can go throw the frisbee, throw the football, that kind of thing, and it's perfectly appropriate for that. The stormwater basins in our particular neck of the woods tend to be shallower because they're wider, but they're shallower because of the karst topography under the soil. And so if you go too deep, you're almost guaranteeing a sinkhole. So instead, the response has been by the water management district say, okay, make them shallower, but make them wider, which takes up more land, but it helps to prevent the sinkhole issue to a large degree.
So I have another question. So if that's the case, if they're going to be shallow so that they won't trigger the sinkhole, why isn't that space just made to be legal to play in? I mean, if that's the case, why do we call it a stormwater? Why don't we just call it something else? Because who's going to be liable for that when the sinkhole does open up? Or a kid does get hurt in that water area, like what?
Right. Mr. Chair, in areas where the stormwater basin does have a sinkhole, it's not uncommon for either the homeowners association, if they're in control of the the stormwater management basin, if they're in control of it, then it's on them to take mitigation measures to protect the residents from what has become an attractive nuisance. There are certain neighborhoods in Newberry where the city has taken over permanent maintenance of the stormwater basins, then it would fall on the city. And so it's sort of on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. But staff's belief is it is legitimate to at least have a certain percentage of the water basins be used for passive recreation, just not maybe the whole 100% of the area.
What percentage are you thinking?
We're
50-50,
tossing out like
40?
50%, something like that, where they could get credit for 50% of the basins, just not 100% of the
Now,
basins.
that level would be in the LDR, not in the comp plan. The comp plan would say, we want to encourage open space.
It's currently
LDR
referenced, I
would
believe, in the
say-
comp plan, and so we might take that out and we might put a global standard, an overall, like you say, overarching kind of high-level standard in there, and then the LDRs are what we would use to implement that standard.
I'm still not understanding why we would use a stormwater drainage area for any public use. I just don't.
Generally, because it's a big, wide open space.
He's
I have one on
he's
my-
not saying that
I
we
have
would
one
use
on my
it for
property. I
public
know what they
use.
look like.
He's saying the developer should get some credit
Right.
for not being able to
Right.
develop on there for green space, not that we should encourage public use on there.
Right.
And I think there's where the wording confusion
Yes,
comes into
that's
play.
probably it. But I don't think they should be able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of buying the property and developing it, is you have that area that you're not going to be able to use. So
So
I don't know how you would change that, or if you would want to change it even, but we have a big one on our property that's 3 acres, and it's full of sinkholes.
let's let Jordan go
That they,
next, and then Brian will come back.
In my
go ahead.
experience with South Florida, and obviously it's different here in North Florida, but green space, you have to look at the definition of what green space is, and that plays a huge factor into it. Most people think of green space as grass, but in a lot of these more urban areas, green space is an area where you can have, like Naeem was saying earlier, protective trees grow on it, and it's not have an impermeable base. So that's why they have these green spaces. It's a place where you can still plant trees around the berm of the retention pond and still have green vegetation in a neighborhood or in a subdivision that doesn't have a house built on it. It's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. Now, going further onto that, some people do play in it, and that's where Brian's talking about with the passive activities. Yeah, I mean, just like the one I have in Newberry Place, plenty of people play in it. It's shallow and wide. We also have one on the other side that looks like it has a sinkhole in it, but the HOA is working through that. But you have to, don't think of green space as a park. You have to think of it as what it is by definition. It's a place where vegetation can grow, and then in the retention pond, it also holds water.
Yep, we have trees in ours,
Yeah.
but nobody plays in it.
But I think what we would need to give, what the commission needs to hear from you guys in terms of advice, do you want to just simply clearly delineate stormwater and then you have to have green space, or do you want to allow the developer to use some of the stormwater area, some percentage? I think absolutely we should cut into it, because right now I think most of the green space ends up being the water basin, right? And what we think we're improving is a development that's going to have some parks and have some hikings and those kinds of things. So that's what we need to say to the commission. Commission, keep these two things completely separate so we know how much recreational green space it is our we'll let you use some sort of percentage. What's the common, is there an industry standard at this point? Board may know this answer too.
In my experience, it varies drastically between city and.
Yeah.
In my experience, it varies drastically between, you could be in Palm Beach County and Broward County and have two completely different green space requirements, just the same as you could be, the city ordinance can be completely different. And I think that's part of, the beauty of having, and writing this and having our own opinion into it as we get to allow to do that. But I think as a good point of reference, not to exceed 50% is probably, I would say, a threshold that I wouldn't go beyond. Because you're going to start turning away, and I say this lightly, you're going to start turning away some developers. Not that that's not always a bad thing, but they do have to try to fit certain criteria in a certain amount of space too. So
to his point, that's where I was going to come up next. It appears that, who was the gentleman that spoke up earlier about the density? What was his name? Paul? Yeah, Paul. Paul stated it earlier. A lot of these developments are squeezing the life out of these spaces that they have. They're not, let's be real. They're not gonna, if you build 1,000 homes and you squeeze the life out of the space, well, what's it gonna cost you to make it 950 to make more space? Yes, you're cutting into your profit margins, but for God's sakes, man, you got 950 homes. I'm sorry that you lost out on 50. So I'm more inclined, in my opinion, it's going to be this. I live in one of these tiny little neighborhoods, as you're aware, that we just recently had a big parking issue. And I see it all the time on the forums. Mr. Mitchell French always says it. Why can't the builders be responsible to develop more spaces instead of depending on the government and depending on us to determine, well, we need more parks, we need more recs. Well, if we can build it onto the builder to have more space available for these individual neighborhoods to have, I'm for a stormwater separation from the green space because, yes, the builder's going to lose a little bit of his profit margin, but it's going to make the society a lot happier in Newberry because there's going to be so much more space. And it's not going to be dependent, and they're going to be screaming at Mayor Marlowe, when's Easton expanding, or when are we going to get more parks? Well, all these neighborhoods will have that individuality to be able to supply for their neighborhood. So I'm more inclined, I can't stand when stormwater is considered green space, because that's not green space. Can't play in it. We have issues with kids riding the bike on it. Someone gets hurt, that's a liability issue. I'd rather have appropriate space. I don't know what the standard is. Like you guys said, it's different in everywhere. But I've seen some of these other cities and towns, and they force their builders to do it. And listen, the builder's not going to turn down millions of dollars just because he's losing a couple $1,000s because he can't build an extra 50 houses on 1,000. I don't know about you guys, but my opinion is I'm getting really fed up with the squeezing the life out of Newberry. I would like to see more green space if possible in between these homes.
Well, and we were only on the first topic here, but I've always thought that, not to be picking on Mr. Hornsby here, but I think he's making a good point about the phasing, right? And that's a struggle for us, but we worked hard to get the urban service area and worth the community. But it does seem to me that the closer you get into the center of Newberry, the less you would ask that because you have access to city parks. The further out to the edge of the urban services area, the more you would ask of that because it's harder for those kids to get downtown to the city parks. So that also, though, seems to me like a guiding principle that we could state in the comp plan, right? That if you were building an apartment complex downtown, right, you're going to have stormwater, but you're not going to require a playground there. But if you are Wiesman and you're out here, right at the edge of the urban service area, we're not going to let you use the stormwater as green space. Is that an LDR or is that a comp plan?
The overall concept could be in the comp plan, and then it would be implemented through the changes in the LDR.
In the interest of getting us out of here before midnight, any last comment on stormwater recreation, Ms. Kathy?
Well, I think it's like what he said, that I think it would be a good idea to have different I don't even know what I'm trying to say, have
Phases,
different.
areas.
For areas, I think that would be perfect, like,
Yeah.
So what do you need from us to separate it?
yeah, what,
Just needs your feedback right now.
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah, so, yeah, I think, I mean, I'll go out on the record and say it, I want a complete separation of stormwater and what's considered green space, like green space cannot be taken advantage of as stormwater. You have stormwater, and then you're gonna have your green space.
Can I ask a question about that with regards to underground stormwater? I recognize that that's not necessarily a thing that we're going to be doing out in the country, but in city, like, for example, the city of Alachua has their entire baseball fields downtown are built on top of a underground stormwater retention area. Is that something that would, like, I'm just, my concern is if we say stormwater blanket and we're not allowing it to be what it could possibly be in a denser area.
I mean, that's my concern about what Naeem just said is I want the flexibility to look at the different areas. So I think that in the outer area, I would be with him. In the inner area, I think I would be with, bring us a different idea, right? And that's what I think Brian needs to hear and the commission needs to hear is, guys, let's not because I think one of the problems that we have right now is that we're pigeonholed, right? This is what it says. It's a one size fits all, right? And what we're trying to do is think a little bit more outside the box and figure out how can we address things in a way that make more sense for us and the way that we want to grow. Jordan?
Brian, do you guys have an equivalent for if I plant, like a slash pine that's equivalent to 25 square feet of green space or something to that effect? That a builder or developer could come in and say this for that in terms of to kind of meet someone at the middle? Or if they plant, Brazilian chili peppers, that gives me 5 square feet of green space or something to that effect?
Mr. Chair, we don't have anything remotely like that right now. The equivalencies we use for vegetation is actually off of our list of protected trees. If you save a tree of a certain width, then you get credit for X number of trees, that kind of thing. We haven't even contemplated vegetation being a replacement for overall land area. And so, really, I mean, what we're looking for is just some guidance on, do you like the concept of reducing the amount of stormwater area that can be counted towards recreational open space, or keeping that the way it is, but increasing the amount of recreational open space requirement? Some communities also will do things like they'll give you credits, they'll let you develop cluster in a more dense fashion if you leave more green space open. It has that has some benefits of having more green space available overall, but then you have the tighter cluster density, which actually clustering saves developers money as well. And so while you're on the one hand, you're going to cost them more money by requiring more green space, on the other hand, you're giving it back to them by letting them develop at a more dense pattern in clustered areas. So,
well, and the idea of the overlay district goes to the idea of the phasings, right? Like, hey, at our entranceway, we want to require developers to make it nicer. We want to have pushed back, right? So I think we've been doing things sort of piecemeal to try to address these concerns because the comp plan is so massive and it's such an undertaking on our staff. We've been doing other things, taking other steps towards these goals. Again, I don't want y'all to be here till midnight, so I think we've got enough feedback on this one point. Let's move through a couple more.
Sounds like
we'll get 2 or 3, and then we'll open up to public comment on 2 or 3, and then we'll do 2 or 3 more.
Sounds like the board's definitely in favor of increasing or diminishing the amount of credit you get for open space for stormwater basins.
I heard that too.
Passive recreation. So
What happens when you tell us that we can have an open discussion about things, we're not going to talk about it.
and the good stuff is really coming, yeah.
Oh, good.
I learned something new.
Okay, so conservation element, it's in good shape. Just a few things to consider. Integrating the conservation element with the future land use, that we could combine it into a single element. That'd be one option.
And give us a 30-second, what is the conservation element?
The conservation element basically defines what type of credits or anything you can give, and what you can do to conserve land. Right now, I don't believe we have any land in conservation, but I think we have our first proposal coming shortly to put some land in conservation. It's sort of related to what I was just talking about, encourage more mixed-use development with clusters to conserve land. So you would develop the same overall gross acreage, but you would just encourage clustering, and then the rest would be put into some kind of conservation easement or something like that. Moving on faster than I meant to, sorry. Intergovernmental coordination, this is really kind of a cleanup recommendation here. This is the element that describes how we're going to relate with all of our surrounding neighbors and with the county and with the state, different agencies, even those that don't necessarily have any kind of, for instance, the school board. School board doesn't really have any jurisdiction over land use decisions, but they still have an impact. Our development has an impact on the schools. What the schools decide to do has an impact on us, and so we still have an intergovernmental coordination element to handle those things. And so, again, this is mostly cleanup. There's some things in there. One of the things that's not really well defined is it says that we will notify and we'll coordinate with our surrounding neighboring government entities. It just doesn't ever say at what point in the process we do that. And so, staff's recommendation is get it ahead of it, do it as early in the process as possible.
When does everybody else do it? Because my understanding is that as soon as it's approved here, that is transmitted. When does Archer and Alachua and Micanopy?
For Mr. Mayor, for large-scale land use changes, definitely that goes to the state for all the state review. This is more at the local level. So the way our comp plan is written, we're supposed to be considering everybody, all the surrounding jurisdictions. If we make a change to our comprehensive plan in terms of land use, we're supposed to be coordinating with those governments around us and how our change may affect their comprehensive plans as well. Really, what it boils down to is just notification, and then they have an opportunity to comment. We haven't really been transmitting our land use applications and things to, say, High Springs or Archer or anybody, as the element does indicate that we should be doing. So the question is just, from staff's perspective, I think we get it out there as soon as possible. As soon as we have an application that's actually going to go before the Planning and Zoning Board, then we would transmit it to the other agencies as well for their comment and review. We get stuff, as an example, from Alachua County all the time, notifying us of land use changes or comprehensive plan changes. Generally, we don't ever comment back because they don't have anything to do with us. But it's the keeping everybody around you aware kind of thing. Like, we don't get anything from Alachua, we don't get anything from High Springs or Archer, but it's a courtesy so that if something, for some unforeseen, there's some unforeseen potential conflict that we didn't pick up on, it gives them the opportunity to say, hold their hand up and say, hey, wait a minute, we've got a potential issue here.
Okay.
Yeah, there was an interesting reference to conflict resolution relative to annexations. We got into one of those, as the mayor's well aware of, a few years ago with the county. Turns out our comp plan actually says we're supposed to be using the Regional Planning Council conflict resolution mediation, but in the intervening years since our comp plan was passed, the state actually, that's something the state is, I don't want to say preempted, but they've dictated that we're actually supposed to use Chapter 164 of the state code to handle those things. So we need to change that to reference the chapter in the state statutes, remove references to Department of Community Affairs that don't even exist anymore. Similarly, there's references to Department of Environmental Regulation or Natural Resources. Those were all rolled under FDEP years ago, and so it's just, again, this is mostly a cleanup. And then economic development, just some very minor suggestions. Bring the word balance into the comp plan. There's language in there in terms of the aspirational aspect of economic development and, bring a balanced, diverse, and sustainable local economy. And then a potential couple of goals that could be added, and these are things that we pick up on in other jurisdictions' comp plans, just as an idea to throw out there and see if there's any interest in it, would be adding something relative to training and support to the community. We currently do career fairs. The building department is looking at trying to start up a building trades internship program with local builders in the high school and things like that. We could sort of enshrine it in, at least as an aspiration in the comprehensive plan in the economic development element.
Brian, when it comes to economic development, one of the things that I would like to discourage are, I don't know how do you lump these businesses together, but let's just say, vape shops, liquor stores, those kinds of things, all along your main thoroughfare. Right now, private business, anybody can go anywhere. Right. But when you talk about balance, it also seems to me that we want to encourage areas of the town where those things can certainly thrive and flourish, and other areas where we would prefer them not to be. Is there a way that we can phrase the economic development to where we're not where we're saying, hey, these types of businesses, we want to have zones of areas where they can go so that we keep the balance?
Interesting you bring that particular item up. I was just reading an article in the Alachua County Today, and they were talking about how I think it was High Springs denied an application for a second vape shop in High Springs. To your point, we don't have anything that would put those limitations on. In fact, I recently got a call from a intended vape shop operator to complain that we allowed one to open up right next door to where he was already going to open up.
I got that same email.
We don't currently we don't dictate who can go where as long as the zoning is appropriate. And I pointed out to him, I said, you see the 4 pizza places, right? All right next to each other. We don't have, but there is a way to do that. The element that we would put that in would be the future land use element. But it's not necessarily economic development, but there is a way to do. We can put that type of language into the future land use element. And then,
if somebody wants to vape, I'm not, and I don't want Newberry to get into the situation where we're picking winners and losers. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that once you have a series of those types of businesses together, the other businesses that may be more attractive are going to go somewhere else because they want to have a different clientele. And I think that our main thoroughfares there, we want those more attractive businesses to be located in those places. So I don't know where, if that's the appropriate conversation for the comp plan, if it's for future land use, but somewhere I think that we need to kind of address that because there's our sort of low input businesses that people are gravitating towards because there's a high return. Right. But those are also where our kids are walking by to get to schools, and I think it's turning away other types of businesses that may be more attractive. Right. And would bring the capital to update the building and make, the district nicer as a whole.
I think, Mr. Mayor, the future land use element would be a place to address it, and then the implementation through the LDRs. And I think sort of a strict adherence to our commercial overlay district standards now is going to help with that as well.
Okay.
Not just letting them get away with, like you said, just coming in and opening them wherever.
But before you go on, you said that High Springs denied a second. Mm-hmm. On what grounds? Do you know that?
I don't think it said it in the article because I read the same article and I was.
Because I was curious to know on what grounds can.
At this point, I don't remember exactly what the grounds were. But
and then, so when it comes to these vape shops and liquor stores and whatnot, so they're required to have certain licensing, correct? But that's not given by the city, or does the city have any kind of say in who gets a license when it comes to that kind of?
The only thing the city does right now, the only thing the state requires, whether it's tobacco, alcohol, whatever, we just have to affirm whether or not they have correct zoning. They do make sure, they require them to make sure they have the correct zoning for what they're trying to do in that location. But we don't have any means to supersede the state's decision to issue permit or anything like that.
It's just my biggest concern is that Newberry's leading the way and making, with the opioid task force and making the county, the state aware of this crisis that we're having. And then all of a sudden, we have a vape shop that's selling Kraken and CBD and, or whatever, different things that it's just like, wow. And I've gone that, as the chair of the opioid task force, I'm the one that's getting all this emails of, yeah, like Newberry's leading the way, and
Do we have a vape shop?
we have a vape shop right, just over 1,000 feet away from the school.
I really need to
So
get
the
out.
middle school, like where the middle school kids walk, there's a vape shop right there, even though they're not allowed to go into it. It's just, yeah, it's right across the street from Villaggio's. I'm getting more publicity to them than I should, but
I'd like to hear Scott's thoughts on this, way he may have some insight towards the
It
other
was
questions.
denied on compatibility standards. First application that came forward was the side of public park.
I didn't know we had a vape shop.
Some other, I'm sorry, I'm so far away from the mic, I don't think it's picked up, but it's primarily compatibility standards. I do agree with the concept, if we're going to try to regulate where these go, then it should be something that we develop some more articulated standards.
Compatibility was the word that was floating around in my head. And on these thoroughfares, we wanted to find what do we see as compatible businesses. And again, I think we create zones and we say, absolutely, this is a legal substance and you can sell it. And we've created these zones that you can go to. And these zones, we see these things. Just like in the overlay district, we said we don't want to see, gas station, or not gas stations. We don't want to see mechanic shops. We don't want to see these things right on these, right? We created compatible businesses, and then you got to have the gumption to stick to it, right? Because somebody's going to come and say, well, they could be your best friend from high school, and but I want to, and I have a right to have a vape shop right there at the light, right? And so then you got to say, no, right? We've got zones for this to happen. Okay, we hit like 4 articles. Any more comments, Ms. Kathy?
I do. I wanted to, because I don't even know what I can ask now at this. I feel bad about asking anything. But we don't have any kind of regulation right now for different businesses. I don't want to say that in a way that's not.
We do
don't have
by
any-
state law. So you can't put a vape shop or liquor store 300 feet from a school? What's the footage?
Actually, those are usually local ordinances.
No, that's why I was wondering, because I know
Isn't it
growing up,
1,000
you couldn't
feet
have a
from
liquor
school?
store near First Baptist. I mean, you couldn't, there's always
Right.
been those.
For alcohol,
So I was
it's 300
wondering, do
feet.
we still have those in place?
For alcohol, it's 300 feet. I don't think we actually have a prohibition, any kind of limitation for just a vape shop.
So can you add that? I mean, I don't know if
I
that's
think
appropriate to ask.
that's
but-
what this conversation is
That's
about.
right.
So you can?
How do we have that balance and create the zoning so that we're not saying no to anybody, we're just saying these activities happen, and then we have reasons, right? Well, the school is here,
Because I wonder
you're
if
in the
that's
overlay
even,
district.
is that legal?
To
You can actually
limit.
tell people? that-
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry, you can't have a
There's-
vape shop here.
There's a number of different methods. I mean, for instance, we have a whole section in our code on adult entertainment.
Well, do we
have
don't have one
any.
of those, do we?
But we don't have any of those
I'm
right
just
now.
checking,
But-
'cause I didn't know we had a
but
vape,
Because it's a legal
Right.
operating business,
Yeah.
you can't prohibit it entirely. You have to make some sort of accommodation for it. You have to provide some area where it can be.
Right.
You can't prohibit it entirely.
So you-
And so it could be a similar type of thing like that, where,
can do that.
or maybe you limit the number overall,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. But yeah, there are means to do it, if that's the direction that.
And in my mind, that's what the word balance means, right? Like we're not saying no to anybody, but
Right.
we want to be balanced about where we're allowing these things, and we want to be strategic and conscious about our main thoroughfares and what kind of businesses and activities are happening there.
Right. Sure.
Okay, so that's like 4 articles. Let's take
Sorry.
public comment on anybody.
And that ends the
That
staff's
ends your
portion.
presentation. Oh, perfect timing. Perfect
I
timing. Well,
didn't
let's,
talk too much.
now you asking questions. Yeah. Let's take public comments or questions on anything, and then we'll let CHW do their part of the presentation, and we'll have.
Just real quick, I know you guys, I've got a lot to cover, but just along these lines of the economic development, so I'm just a little concerned about the downtown business revitalizing, adding more as more homes come in, that it's a more robust, people can walk and enjoy microbrewery, just things like that. And I just see a lot of these developments, and we'll just talk about the 2 that we talked about earlier, Saps and Tanglewood. They both got proposed a combination of 340,000 square feet of commercial space. Obviously, Country Ways added some, commercial things, and I get where you would need, some convenience type things to help with these large neighborhoods. But in doing that, I'm just wondering if we're kind of diluting opportunities here in town. Thank you.
Absolutely. CHW, come on down.
You guys questions?
Hmm?
You guys questions or a presentation?
He has a presentation.
Yeah,
Is this for another vape shop or?
the adult entertainment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, board members.
And thanks CHW for working on this with us, and providing the help.
Absolutely. We appreciate the opportunity.
I didn't know we had a whole section on it.
No, Brian, I learn something new every time I'm here. I feel so fortunate.
We're listening. It's getting late now, but we're listening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I want the dialogue, I want the feedback. So Brian gave you a very good background of what we've been tasked with. We're looking at the future land use element, the transportation element, and the housing element. Making sure that those are cohesive with the other elements, of course. So I won't really summarize our charge too much. Do want to go over a little bit of what we've heard from the public and what we've taken from the strategic plan. We've obviously incorporated that as well. And then really want to touch on a few key points within each of those 3 elements for your feedback. What does it mean to you? And kind of guide our direction in how we address some of these things. I'll skip through this, just kind of highlighting. So I will spend a minute on this slide. So the future land use element, that's your land use decisions, how your land, what types of uses go where generally. Then it's implemented by the land development code, which we're not dealing with in this, but that's kind of how land is developed. The traffic circulation element, I'll go ahead and say this up front. By its title, it's focused on vehicles. We'd like to see that change. Maybe call it transportation and mobility element, where you're looking at sidewalks and bike lanes and other modes of transportation as well. So we have some ideas of how to work on that. And then your housing element, looking at the types of housing. Is it safe? Is it affordable? And those kind of ideas. Well, so in the 2 open houses, we had about 152 comments, and we've boiled those comments down into the 34 that are on this table. I would say that you could see, but I know it's hard.
I can see now.
So we highlighted just the ones that have gotten the most, that we heard the most. That's what that far right column is, the frequency. That's how many times we heard those comments. So you can see that there's a lot of comments about the rural character, how much residential development is occurring. There's a comment there about the urban service area and wanting to transition density, which we've heard this evening even, concern about traffic, more public parks, neighborhoods, things of that nature. And so we gave an update to the City Commission not too long ago.
I'll just finish this slide. So most comments were about land use or traffic or recreation, and there's some overlap there. And then obviously the strategic plan and how those correlate. So we presented this slide to the City Commission, or update, and these were our main takeaways from the comments that we've heard. And the sense that we got from the City Commission is we need to focus on all these. So we have, and we've taken that to heart. But what we really need to know from this diocese is, are there other things that we need to be looking at? Are there, of this list or of these ideas, issues, concerns, what opportunities, what have you, should we focus our efforts? And that's kind of what I want to flesh out today.
Can you go back to that?
Yes, sir.
Let's see, because I have a couple. Anybody have anything that's not on that list that you think should be part of this conversation?
I don't know if it factors into improved walkability downtown, but considering the number of students who are crossing major highways to get to school. I mean, I applied for this board because my daughter got hit by a car. Like, it's fine. But for me, the walkability of not just the downtown, but all of the connecting corridors would be, that would be a thing for me that I don't see.
One of the ones that you know, and I think it's kind of here in diversifying housing stock and walkability, but I know that the commission has thought about requiring developments to have sidewalks on both sides. I know the commission is really interested in lot sizes, and they are really opposed to the 40-foot lot sizes. Again, in my mind, that's more of a phasing. Like, I think that closer to downtown, you might want the 40-foot. Further out, you may want the larger lots. And it may be on your radar, but we didn't present about that on our side, and you're not specifically saying those things. And I know that's going to be something that is a topic of conversation. It certainly could fall into some of these different categories, but sidewalks everywhere. And then, you know, I think that there needs to be some standards for sidewalks. The sidewalk that goes down 27 towards Oakview, there's like a 1-foot strip of grass, and then there's the sidewalk.
Cars who don't even know what the speed limit is.
And to me, that's
on the highway.
right. You know, and to me, that's a walk path. It's not a sidewalk. Right.
That is
2 kids can't get it past if you got 2 strollers.
That is being on the Thunderdome.
Yeah. And so
Honestly is.
I don't know if it's curb and gutter. I don't know exactly how to write it up to where we get some distance in the sidewalk where the pedestrians are clearly moved apart from folks. But I think we got to do a much better job of specifying. It's not just that you put down the concrete 6 inches away from the road. It's a safer. I understand sidewalks will always be, you know, somewhat risky, but those kind of things. And is that all on your radar, and it's kind of in these categories, or do we need another bullet point or two that specifically speak to? I'd love to. We don't have any apartments. We don't have any high rises, and I think there's some core of our downtown, right? High rise is big, but some core downtown where we're looking for that kind of density, right?
Yes, sir.
But then again, out towards the outer edge of the urban service area, I think it's entirely appropriate to have 1-acre lots, right? So again, it goes, I don't want a one-size-fits-all. I want a visionary document that allows for different applications to do different things.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else have?
I mean, on the improved walkability, I agree. I think there needs to be some sort of protective safeguards placed, especially like on US 27, where, I mean, listen, I walk pretty much almost every.
there because it was so bad.
I walk mostly every night with my wife, and by the time it gets dark is when we're coming back, and it is the scariest thing. Like, I feel like I'm gonna have to eventually throw her over the fence just to, you know, because the cars are coming in so fast.
Yeah. And FDOT
They don't care.
So-
They don't care.
They maintain that road, and,
Okay.
and they dictate what goes in there right away.
They don't maintain it.
So that's the challenge with that
Yeah.
specific example.
Yeah.
But what we can't control is our local roads and new development and how they are required to provide sidewalks. Whether or not there's a landscape strip between the sidewalk and the road where there's vehicles, getting some separation there.
Yeah, it's just
Those
protective
things we can look
safeguards
at.
around, just,
Sure. Yes, sir. I believe you had another point up.
no, I mean, I like that the commission is leaning more towards the fact of like all these residential areas that end up cutting through these big corridors, right? Like Oakview, Village where I live. A lot of the kids use our area as a walkthrough, which I don't mind it. When a homeowner complains that all these kids are so loud, it's like, listen, I'd rather have the kids super loud and have them alive than trying to walk off of US 27th and potentially get hurt or killed.
Yeah.
So I'm a big, want the commission to continue to talk about making sure that these new developments have these walkable sidewalks. So it gives us kids a safe haven to cut through if need be.
Sure. Absolutely.
So like on 27, there's nothing. So I guess what I'm asking is for new businesses that are building like on 26 or 27, how do you implement them being in a plan where they put more of a buffer? So if it's a state road doing it, how does that transfer to a business if it's the state road's responsibility?
Well, along those state roads, it's a big challenge. I'll just be honest with you. But inside the developments is where the city, has the ability to dictate.
I'm
Yes.
wondering, how does the
Yeah.
city?
But we also-
On like 27.
Through the overlay district, we've addressed that too. So if you want to build new business now on 26 or 27, you have to build them to a much higher standard. And so that will speak somewhat to the issues that you guys are talking about, because these are businesses that are already willing to spend more money to develop something that's a little bit nicer. So some of these things will be addressed in the overlay district. And the overlay district was one of those measures we took because we knew it was taking a while to get to this point. So, and we wanted to protect those corridors immediately.
I'm so sorry, I feel like I'm asking questions that have already been answered.
No, that's the city is a big, long, 12-hour epic movie. And everybody kind of comes in at different moments of the movie and figure out what's the plot line, right? So these are good because everybody's in the exact same place, right? Everybody's heard parts of these. Very few of any of us have heard all of it, right? All right.
Thank you. So these are the items that I'm specifically going to ask your input on. You'll notice that, they carry over from the previous slide. A lot of them hit on what you've already brought to our attention this evening. So I'll just go ahead and I'm not going to read through each one of these. I'm just going to hit them as they come. So in the future land use element, we have what we're looking at here is the city of Newberry in the context of land development boundaries with particular respect to Alachua County. The urban cluster for Alachua County is where they're focusing growth. It's predominantly on the perimeter of the city of Gainesville. Just beyond that, if you're working from Gainesville out, I guess, the green area is the growth management area. That's where if properties are annexed into a municipality, the county regulations would still apply, so they wouldn't be able to utilize local regulations. And then
I might ask you next time to change the color for the growth management area, because I think that implies that that's all green space. And where the most uncontrolled growth in Alachua County is happening is in the county's GMA, right? So all of that, what looks like green space is not, no criticism of the color choice, but that is not green space, right? That is not agricultural. Jonesville is in the middle of that, right? Tioga goes all the way down.
I was gonna say,
Right.
maybe you should switch it like where the white is of City of Newberry, that would be
Right.
our green space, and show that that's a protected green space. And
Yeah.
And then the growth management.
Just for, you know,
I just want to make sure, I want to make sure that I understand. So the
Yeah.
urban clusters where the county allows development at urban scale, the growth management areas, they're rural agriculture.
It is. My
and
comment
lower
is just
density.
that the green, the color green makes it look like, because we've heard tonight, right, we have our urban service area. Newberry is actively trying to protect the green space outside of the urban service area. Inside of the urban service area, we are saying this is where we see development. And that's very, very tough because we have a lot of green space inside the urban service area. And when people see building there, they say, we're losing the rural nature. My response is, no, the rural nature we're trying to preserve is outside the USA, right?
Right.
So when we talk about the growth management area, I know exactly what the growth management area is. We lost that vote by less than 200 votes. But it just means that the county controls what grows there, and the county is allowing Jonesville to grow, allowing Tioga to grow from Newberry Road to Archer Road, right? Inside the growth management area. So it's just a color.
It's technically in the urban cluster.
Right. But we're getting off on something.
We
They
are.
argued about, they were trying to prevent growth from happening when they got people to vote for the growth management area. So it was just
Yes,
the color green makes it seem like, oh, there's all that green space there. That's my point.
Okay. We're not going to like where this slide's going. So
All right.
So my understanding of the growth management area is that it will remain low density, and it won't allow commercial development unless it's within an activity center or traditional neighborhood development that's focused on transit. So you really have between the urban cluster and of the county and the urban services area of the city of Newberry is area that's going to remain rural. And that's my understanding of the intent, and we'll get clarification on that, certainly. Moving on. So the city of Newberry, you're all familiar with this, and I think there's 26 projects now. The reason I bring this up is a lot of them, or all of them, are within the urban service area of the city. But I highlight kind of a general area of downtown, and there's one development in downtown. So, going back to, what we've heard, what I think we all want here is investment in downtown, redevelopment and infill in downtown.
And Brian, can we get an updated graph with the new urban service areas that we're still using the kind of.
Okay. I'll make sure that I update that slide. Yes. And then focusing on the downtown area, so we have the historic district that's kind of in the heart of that with the brown outline, and then the purple beyond that is the community redevelopment area, with an exception of where investment can be made to the east, northeast. So just giving some kind of context here on development and what's happened. In light of that, what do you think of preserving a rural character in the city of Newberry? How do you think we can foster growth within the downtown? And then, do we want to encourage new land development opportunities? And I'll kind of open the floor.
Thoughts?
I'm afraid to say.
Open forum.
We are, and we want your ideas and understand, what's your vision and how you want the city to grow.
Hey, preserve the rural character. Let's start with number one. Listen, people move here for that reason, right? And then if we start doing, it's like that concept of you came here to get away from what you escaped. but now you're bringing that here. Mentality. We need to protect our rural character as much as possible. That's like a non-negotiable. And I think the mayor's doing an exceptional job, as well as the commission, with implementing that we dedicate certain areas that, listen, this is strictly untouched. But we need to make sure that we hold to our guns on that, and we don't budge.
Can you speak more specifically? Like, is the rural character the agriculture lands, the active agriculture, or is
Or the
it,
small town feel.
That was what I was going to ask.
or is it, exactly, or is it the small town feel? Is it the architecture?
So the small town field, I'm just gonna say right now, that I've seen populations of 30, 40, 50,000 people, and they still do what you do, Miss Kathy, and make that one kid, it's all just one, it's doing small things with great love. And you do that every day at our high school, and it feeds, and that feeds to other people. So the small town mentality continues to strive as long as we as individuals continue to strive to preserve that, where we have the parades, where we continue to have the small town events that will have a 50,000 population community, but we still have. Go ahead.
The biggest thing that I help with that is the architecture, how the city looks.
Right.
The way the city looks will give you that rural feeling. You can't just say you want people to just genuate that. To generate that. You want the look of the town when you drive in. Countryway did a great way. The new Countryway will give it that rural feel when you drive in with the water tower. You don't think of a neighborhood being like most neighborhoods in Gameville. So you want to have that closer to town so people look to be, okay, this is what I really enjoy walking downtown. And that keeps that feeling when you have the festivals, when you have other events. You can't negate that when you're coming through Newberry. Outside, it is what it is, but you want to at least have something when you're driving through Newberry, you feel like the history of Newberry.
And I think that when we did the urban service, or the overlay district, we spoke specifically to design standards. And you can go into some of the neighborhoods and all the houses still look like little unique houses, and you go into other neighborhoods and there's like 4 different models and 3 different shades of color, right? And so I think I agree, when we think about preserving the rural character, those are the kinds of things that we can implement, design standards that if you're a local builder or a national builder, great, it's free market, but everybody needs to come with some unique housing, some different packages, because they all have it, right? All of those builders have different packages. It's just about what is the standard. Again, though, I would be careful here because all of those increased standards increase the cost, and we still want to be affordable housing. So I go back to it's not a one size fits all. It's an area, right? We need to have some areas where we can kind of keep the cost down. We need to have other areas where we say, no, this is prime territory we're driving through. We want it to look.
But that's not limited to just the housing. It's everything, the amenities in the neighborhood or around the neighborhood. You can still dress it up that you don't even worry about what the houses look like. You're looking at when you driving in how it looks, and that's the biggest thing. Like the country where you drive in, you see the outlines of things, and it gives you that feeling. So that's kind of what you want to look for.
Okay.
I'd like to hear some ideas from you, though, back to us. Like, what are our possibilities? Because I hear this all the time, preserve the rural character.
What do you think?
How do we do that, right?
No pressure.
Well, I would love to hear that.
Thanks for asking. I have a slide.
You're not going to like where this slide's going.
I mean, I appreciate the sentiment and the opportunity, Mr. Mayor. I truly do. I don't want to be heavy-handed in what we're proposing to you, at least at this stage, because we need feedback and we need direction from the community. And that's really where we're at. Now, I can tell you everything that I've heard, I appreciate and support. Now, but just a case in point, I've heard preserve the rural character so many times. The reason I'm standing here now is to understand what it means and why. Because to me, the rural character was the agricultural fields and having expansive views as you drive through town. It wasn't so much the core of town and developments and how those developments feel. So it's a big learning lesson on my part as well.
Even in the outskirts, if you have something that draws you when you're coming through town, it gives you that feel, and that makes you feel neighborly as much as you can be, without really having to worry about how many people moving it, because we've already seen the growth of people moving. So how do we draw them people closer to each other in the neighborhood by having something that draws them to the history, everything that's about Newberry?
When you get into, with that, parks, restaurants, like the town center, like you can go to Country Ways Town Center at a festival and run into, a bunch of people. So you have a little bit of that going as well. For me, I think when we're talking about preserving the rural character, yeah, those parks, those spaces where people can gather, community gardens in these neighborhoods that are coming in would be a great place to make that a dog park, for goodness sakes, like those kinds of things. I know that that's not really rural, but it provides that neighborly feel and
Opportunity for interactions and gathering.
You can design it in a way that gives
I'm still stuck on rural.
So-
Rural to me is no one. There's nothing. That's how I grew up here. One red light had four sides. There was nothing. So that's rural. I would like to move away from that and have something else. So what is this vision we're attaching to the word rural? Because we're not rural, as far as I can see. So where are we headed?
to me, that's like the artwork on Joel's coffee shop.
But see,
right? Like
it
to call back
is,
to that.
and that's my granddaddy on that coffee shop.
So you
That's my granddaddy and his tractor. But I'm trying to see, like, yeah, what is...
historic look to the city gives you that feeling.
Right, what are we, like, I'm just gonna use this example, like the Newberry Watermelon Festival, the last 15 years, we fought tooth and nail to keep that festival going. And when I say it has been the biggest headache that I've ever had, but it's a labor of love, and I will not give it up because it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many people moving here that have no idea about agriculture, support agriculture, know about food, anything, which is great. But, and I've heard it's very antiquated. Why would we do that? And in the last, like, maybe 10 years, we've managed to develop some strategies, marketing, and different things, and we've walked kind of into the light and got into social media. We've evolved because we've had to.
Sure.
Rural was us at the American Legion with people parked along the road. That's what it was at one time, but now we're not that anymore. And I would love to embrace that and I want to keep growing, but that's rural to me. Like, we have so many people that now that don't understand what rural is. So how do we incorporate that, like, in downtown where there's not really any place to walk around, really? How do we keep an area like that's in the city of Alachua where you have areas for festivals and they can block off the street and have just walking?
Mm-hmm.
No, where do we have that anymore in this? Like, I'm trying to
just down by the libraries.
Trying to picture, like, where can we have that? Because that, to me, that is, like, I think where I would see it, like these hometown festivals and the historic nature of things that is continued.
Mm-hmm.
But with so many people, I'm here to tell you, it's almost impossible. Not impossible, but it is taking a lot of work. And we still hear it every year. I mean, we still, why are we doing this? So
Yeah.
I would love to have an answer to that. Like, what is rural? Like, what is that? What is it going to look like?
Yeah.
Let's let Jordan jump in. He's been patiently waiting.
I was just going to say, I think to answer your question, I think rural is obviously, not to sound cliche, in the eye of the beholder. But I think, like, when you say the words rural character, I think of my wife and I, and this is a true story. We don't ride our bikes in the city of Newberry, and I'm ashamed to say that. We go to Trenton, where the train station is, where there is a piece of historical memory or as a piece of conversation where you could meet with somebody and say, man, do you see this old train station? And then we get on our bikes on a paved asphalt bike path and we ride all the way to the Swanee River and back. To me, that's rural character. I'm out there in that green space. I'm out there next to the bushes and the vegetation. I have this piece of historical monument, if you want to call it, whether it's a iron beam from 9/11 or whatever the case is, that brings in a conversation. And the conversation with a stranger is what brings in that rural character and that hometown feel. You could do the same exact thing, don't bite my head off, but you could do the same exact thing in Tioga or in Hale Plantation on one of their nice bike paths or nice sidewalks and have a sitting station with a monument of some type. I'm not talking, we don't have to have half the Titanic, but something that brings a conversation in, that brings in man, this is from the historical part of Newberry. This is what made us, and look where we are now. Now we have single-family homes next to multi-use, next to commercial spaces, and at the beginning, just like that mural, that's where we started, and this is where we are. So when you say preserve rural character, that's what comes to my mind, integrating history into modern age.
Ms. Polo?
So one of the things that I was thinking about with this was, murals, like you're mentioning, historical sites. I think it would be super cool to have like a guided walking tour of Newberry, wear your headphones and hear, like at a museum, like a guided tour of downtown. But having, like when High Springs did the murals all over town, like a whole weekend festival brought people in to look at these murals being done, and each one of them is historical in some way, shape, or form. So I wonder if that's a way to integrate art and culture into our rural character.
They do that in the town of Lake Placid, Florida. It's literally called the town of murals. Not only that, it's the Caladium capital of the world, but they integrate Florida cracker history into murals in the town. You can go by the city, or you can go by the town Winn-Dixie, and on the entire side of the building is old cracker cowboy cattleman, massive mural. When you go downtown near the Caladium monument, there's it's a big mural of nothing but all the different species of caladiums, and that's what makes the town of Lake Placid what Lake Placid is. And I'm sure we can do the same thing. One watermelon mural is probably not even close to the justification that it needs for this town, and the same thing can be said here. There's no reason why we can't have a massive bow and arrow archery museum, not to exaggerate, or a mural out in Easton or whatever the case is, something like that brings in somebody from the hometown or local area, like you're saying, that I think adds that longevity and artistic piece.
So how do you do that?
Let's let him sleep on that one, and let's go to the number 2 there.
Thanks for that bailout.
Foster growth within downtown?
Yes. So one of the things I want to have a discussion on, and it's a maturing discussion that we're having now, is historic preservation. And, the historic buildings that we have, you asked for my opinion, so here, I'll give it to you. I think the historic buildings need to be treated separate, and they need to look historic and have certain design guidelines. I think new construction shouldn't look or mimic historic buildings. I think that they should be complementary and compatible, both in scale and elements and things of that nature. And they can share some of those architectural elements, but they shouldn't be required to look like historic buildings. I think personally it takes away from those buildings that are truly historic. So with that said, I guess I should phrase this way. It seems kind of a no-brainer, but I'll ask, do you want infill development? Do you want a higher density in the downtown area? Do you want the downtown area to be walkable and investment in the downtown area? No.
I do, because it makes it easier to draw people for, or they have the festivals right there by the library, or they have the market on Saturdays right across from the city hall. You want something that draws people closer together, and having an area where people can walk and congregate and do all that kind of stuff is beneficial to everybody that's in Newberry. So.
The thing, though, that we have to take into consideration with that is where do all these people park? Like, I live in the Old Country Way, so I can walk right up past the high school and be downtown. I do it every weekend, visit all the different places. We need to have some place where, you know, people can drive in from unwalkable neighborhood, like where they can't walk downtown and park. And the only parking that there is downtown is right here. And we don't want to take that away from the restaurant or the other businesses. Like, I feel like there should be some kind of way in the infill to incorporate some kind of parking along with, you know, whether
Just so everybody is aware, when the two-way pairs come in, the plan, my plan, is that we'll be able to then shut down the existing Newberry Road for all of these festivals, and then you can take the festival from the light all the way down to 337, as big as it wants to grow. But one of the unanswered questions in that is still parking, right? If everybody's been to Micanopy's festival, you're parking in people's yards, right? You're walking a mile. So I don't know that there's a steady answer to that besides building a parking tower, but
Parking at UF for a football game.
Right.
You can't get around
It's hit or miss.
I mean, I get that.
But I think
if
we should think about it, right?
Yeah.
Where can we, the ladder streets are supposed to increase the parking downtown by 130%.
Right.
I'll tell you, the only place that I've talked to Mr. Pat Post is his area. All the land, you can do anything. That place, I mean, it's all kind of, another store, but the land use is open space. There's zero parking issues. So those are spaces that you could do something with, but as far as downtown, you're limited.
And I'm not even thinking about when we're talking about festivals and parking and capacity for large gatherings. I'm thinking about if we're going to grow our downtown, we're gonna have businesses come in. We're gonna, you know, get an awesome brewery to come in and be downtown, and maybe some commerce in there somewhere, some shops and retail. Like, where are people gonna park for that?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of what we need to take into consideration.
I think you make a great point. It's, you know, the festivals are one thing, and you can find a place and make that work, but what's going to draw people in every Saturday or Sunday? You know, what about the regular weekend where you're not having a big event or something like that? You want to be able to draw people into downtown and have them stay and support your local businesses. One of the ideas we've had that I've baked into the backup material is looking at a downtown master plan. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing up the one-way pairs. I hope there's a lot of opportunity there where we can see the areas between the pairs that could be utilized for parking, could be shut down for festivals, you know, could be public green space, hard space, what have you, that people want to spend time in downtown Newberry and in turn support local businesses and things of that nature. And also that encourages people wanting to live downtown and providing opportunities for them to be able to live downtown.
I'm just curious, if it's a chicken or the egg situation, right? Like, how are we gonna get new businesses to come down if there isn't a plan in place for them to know that their patrons are gonna have a place to park? And
I'm just waiting for the road to change. I'm seriously, I hate to say that, but it just seems like we're going in circles until that road is done. I just can't imagine, because right now, even going to Main Street Sweets and Eats, I don't like being on I don't even like walking down the sidewalk. There's just too much traffic. There's too much going on. Obviously, I didn't know there was a vape shop, so I don't get out much. But
You're not missing
when I
anything.
do, it's quite scary to me to be like, it's
Sure.
too much going on. And if you want families downtown, I wouldn't walk with my children down that sidewalk at this point. But when the road comes, that's all going to change. I think we have a great opportunity.
Wider
Some vision
sidewalks,
for it.
landscaping, shading,
Yeah, I
things
do.
that make
I feel
it
like it's
safer.
gonna be just great for some reason. I don't know.
the speed
It may
limit
not be, but
to 15.
All right, Jordan and then Naeem.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, going to what you were saying earlier about, fostering that growth and then tying back to the rural culture, I think going forward, I would like to see more mixed use or commercial space downtown. The bottom line is whether you appreciate it or not, there is a space for it because it allows the fostering of business to come in. When we constrain businesses and developments to specific historical limitations, and don't get me wrong, I have a total utmost admiration for historical buildings, but I see far too often a lot of cities put massive limitations. If somebody wants to overhaul a historical building, I don't think new developers and new construction coming in should, as you said, be constrained to the same building material requirements or building requirements that historical buildings have, because what happens is that deters everything that we talked about from section 1 here, talking about the rural character. Because if I'm looking at two different buildings, my first statement is, wow, look how long we've come in the construction industry. We no longer have to do everything this way, and we can use a completely different material. So I think that adds to it. Additionally, I would like the city to look at, on the commercial side of it, if something is zoned commercial or business comes in, that minimum requirement, instead of using, I think it's like 552 or 555 or 522, the FDOT requirement for sidewalks, I would like to see us elaborate further on that. If it's a high traffic area, we go to the 4-foot requirement versus the 36 inches with the rumble strips, or whatever the case is, because I think everybody here can appreciate that 36 inches ain't a lot of room for two people to walk side by side. And yeah, so, not to mention, it just fosters and it opens up the idea for a family to say, hey, I feel more comfortable walking my little one on the sidewalk, even though this is a congested road, because it's 4 feet. I have that much more room. It's little things like that I think you'll find in smaller communities that foster that rural character that you don't see in the bigger communities, in the bigger cities that are just more concerned with that urban development. So that's
the biggest thing as far as restaurants and commercial development is the internal structure and the rural character inside. Exterior, you really don't pay that much attention once you're walking in and out of a building, but once you're there, that's where you can really entrench yourself in history by what's around the location. So that's, to me, that's the more value than what the outside particularly says, because you do limit a developer from doing anything based off what you restrict, but internally, that's where you really can get the character. You can build the character of Newberry as much as you can.
Naeem, were you?
Oh, you're good. So fostering growth in downtown. So I come from a major city, Miami, right? I feel safe walking in downtown Miami. Didn't matter what time it was. So people, see, that's the thing. But that's the thing. People don't know. So but what's cool about downtown is that there's something open constantly. And right now, I'm so stoked for, I believe Remy, she has her art studio in downtown that she does a lot of stuff for kids, families, and she promotes that. What she's intertwined now is our local tattoo artist. She coincide with, I think it's Blood and Glory from Jonesville, and they're moving in to her art studio, which is a great marriage. And that's great in downtown, because even though my daughter's not getting tattooed, I'm full of tattoos, but Remy has an art studio that's catered to kids to draw, to build that artistic stuff. And it creates that good atmosphere. So what's going on in downtown is currently great. But to Jordan's point, right now, for example, I took my daughter to Main Street Sweets. It was amazing. But then what did we do? Got in the car and got out.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing. There's this cabinet shop that's literally hounding the corner that I've lived here and I've never seen the lights on, ever.
They're open every day.
They were. That's my family. Be easy.
Sorry, but I'm like, I just don't know. Like, I don't, that's the thing. I don't know. I didn't even know that.
But they don't work as much as they used to. I will.
So there's stuff in downtown Newberry that, like, that's like, no offense, but like a cabinet store, really, that's like where the Newberry Floor Store should be in that warehouse district. The downtown area should be where there's an art studio, where there's a cafe, where we're going to have, I believe, a new eatery is going to come in there. A downtown bistro. That's stuff that makes downtown so appealing to to people.
I agree.
And speaking of the balance, right? Like I love Dr. Wynn, but Dr. Wynn is not utilizing one of our oldest, most historic buildings
To the full.
to its fullest extent.
Right.
Right? And so
So frustrating.
how do you balance that, telling someone what they can or can't do in property that they own and saying, yeah, but you're in the heart of our downtown, right? And you're not.
Taking a piece away from what you could.
Exactly.
Does something like a downtown association, kind of like an HOA, like a business association?
Well, we have the CRA,
Right.
doesn't really speak to a lot of these things. I'm right now working on creating a Newberry Historic Society so that we can write up history, so we can keep those artifacts. We've got memorabilia right here on the railroad tracks that could be exactly what Jordan's talking about, right?
I have a lot of stuff in the.
So I think that there are things like that are in the works. I want to ask you guys, because one of the concerns that I have is you've got the historic downtown, you've got the town center, you have Sandia Park, which is going to have its own town center. You have the application that's just at the beginning, the ranch is going to have its own downtown. To a master downtown plan, it seems like that should be a larger than just the historic downtown, and we should be encouraging some differences between the downtowns, because I think what we're going to end up with is we're going to have the historic, and then we're going to have 4 town centers that are all identical, right? When we have the opportunity to maybe push each one in a little bit different direction so that there's a connecting feel, but they're also unique, right?
So for the OG, so to finish my statement on, to make it the OG, original downtown, to Jordan's point, Fairfield's point, is we hold, as long as I've been on this planning and zoning board, we hold our builders to a different standard. You know, we have developers agreements, we talk to them, we ask them to do more than what's required. And they usually are pretty good and fair, and they're like, hey, I know I could build 4, but I'll build 3 so we could spread out, right? Well, why aren't we doing the same thing? I know we do some of the same things, but we should be taking into account our downtown with the same attitude of what Jordan said. Instead of 36 inches, 4 or 4.5, whatever the case may be. When it comes to the lighting, let's not shave off the top just to try to cut corners. No, if we're requesting our builders to do more, then we should ourselves be acting as if as well, especially when it comes to our downtown area, because that's going to promote the growth. That's going to promote more businesses to come here. The parking does suck, but the parking sucks everywhere. And I'll tell you this, people make a lot of, I'm surprised that these people that complain so much about the Newberry football team and the parking situation, I'm like, dude, I would be out there chaining my front yard and doing what they did at the old school Orange Bowl days, $5 to park.
You are not
10.
kidding.
And I will make,
Me too.
I'm like, man, bring on football season, bring on baseball season, because I got parking, and you could park safe and sound for $5 a parking. But some of these people would just rather get on social media and be like, can you tell people to get off my lawn? No, why don't you charge them to be on your lawn? That sounds like a lot better treat.
Jordan?
I don't mean to beat a dead horse. I know we've been on this topic for a while, but to answer what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, I think there's a great opportunity for the city to revisit. Was there not a grant or a tax incentive program for Stonehouse in the storage facility? When the city designates, historical buildings, that if a company comes in, it might be worth, I don't know what the specifics, if we already have that in place, but re-looking at that tax incentive break, because I think for a lot of small businesses, at the end of the year, these S-corps and SOPROPs, that's a huge chunk, and if they can get any type of incentive back from the city, I'm not saying 1 for 1, but anything is better than nothing, it might be able to at least stimulate some growth in the economy, at least right here on Main Street, because I think you're right. I think with all of these developments, we are going to have, five developments, and everybody's just literally going to drive right through Main Street going to them in order to stimulate that growth here. I think we're going to have to do something. I think that's going to be probably the easiest and fastest way to stimulate it locally here. That's all I'll say.
To your point, having all those different neighborhoods will eliminate your traffic congestion. If you have a piece of history in every one of these neighborhoods, something that looks historic as much as possible, then you want everybody focused just on downtown. You have people downtown, you have people in Countryway, the ranch, that way, so you spread people out, but they still have the same connection to the city, can eliminate everyone focused just on this location.
I think when you say connection, what I picture in this is having some kind of interconnectivity between all of these different town centers. Hop on your bike and go to the restaurant that's in the ranch, and then go to the boutique that's in Tanglewood. Well, maybe not that far, but you know what I mean. Like having, some.
Metro mover?
Trail,
Well, and like for Sandia Park, which is the development around Champions Park, we've been working to try to have a golf carts lane by the railroad track just for that, so that if you're taking your kids there, you can hop on a golf cart and get to Newberry's downtown. If you're downtown, you can go out there. But those kinds of things, they become problematic because you got to work with railroads, you got to work with other governments and those kinds of things. The railroad really is the hardest government to work with. But I see connectivity as in, how do we get there? How do we get to you, right? How do we move people back and forth? It's getting late, and I don't know how many more decision points you've got.
I only have like 30 more slides.
But to Naeem's point, and this body actually, when the two-way pairs come in, back to Miss Kathy, everything's going to happen. You guys suggested, FDOT agreed, all of the street lights are going to be upgraded. They're all going to have that small town look and feel, and that started with the P&Z board right here.
And that goes a long way. I mean, just the consistent lighting, the consistent landscaping, signage, those kind of things really make you know you're in a certain place. One thing before we do move on to this, we had a good example of this evening with the land use and zoning change on the Ice House. In the downtown core historic area, does it make sense to have a single land use and zoning that allows for a mixture of compatible uses, both residential and non-residential? Very similar to the commercial land use with the CCBD, but maybe it's a downtown district, maybe it is utilizing the CBD, maybe with some tweaks. Is that something that this board sees as valuable? Having the opportunity for a mixture of uses, having something around that encompasses the entire historic district, so you're not worried if, my lot's residential and yours is commercial, and having to sort through those kind of ideas.
Are you talking about something all the way literally from one family to commercial? I'm not holding you to, I'm just asking, is that your general?
It would have a
versus
range.
breaking it up versus 1 to 3 family.
Sure, it would have a range of housing options, up to attached units. Then, even, larger homes could be subdivided into multiple units. Just looking for variety and creative ways of increasing density, accessory dwelling units being one mechanism, but then also allowing for commercial type uses. And it would be within the historic district, and you wouldn't have just this kind of Euclidean commercial along the front and whatever's to the back.
I would not be opposed to the idea of simplifying it and doing something like a 1 to 2 family code and a mix to commercial, because typically a lot of those mixed end up going in that route anyways, and then a 3 is a separate. The problem is when you do like 1 to 3 at all, anybody who has opportunity and has the liquidity to jump on a 3 family and has the space to do so is going to do so, and that a 3 family is totally different than a 1 to 2 family, and the whole aspect of what some person says rural culture could be is completely gone out the window. Now, keep in mind, I'm all for downtown having more of a cluster feel, so I can recognize and appreciate that. I think this is worth probably longer a conversation than we could probably have tonight, because I can appreciate the sensitivity to my house being on that one way, if I had a house on that one way, and what I'm zoned as versus the ice cream shop across the street. And how that plays into financial aspects. So, but I wouldn't be opposed to looking at the idea and consolidating. I would not be a fan of a one family all the way to commercial as one zone. Just put that out there.
As you were saying it, I was thinking to say, I need to sleep on that. That's an idea I need to take back and let it roll around. Okay, new development land opportunities? Or you want to skip that
Sure,
one?
I think we'll skip that. Really the point behind that is encouraging things like the agritech, business park, and getting other businesses and industries, multifamily development, retail, those kind of ideas, looking at potential incentive opportunities, looking at the, approval process. Are there ways that we can, make that more efficient and predictable, not easier, but if you do this, you can expect this outcome. So that's all I'll say about that. So looking at the transportation, I did kind of a desktop analysis. I couldn't help myself. I apologize, but I really did an inventory of your sidewalks to see, what, connections are made. And I think the city's made long strides in recent years to make connections to, along corridors, but certainly, there is more that could be done in getting wider sidewalks where people are going to walk the most. I think I've heard is of critical importance, and making sure that, to schools and to parks and things of that nature. So,
Well, and when we think about the sidewalks, it also occurs to me, it's not just the width of the sidewalk, but it's the landscaping of the sidewalk as well.
Is it
Are there
protected
some
from
shades?
cars?
Are there some, is there some barriers? I use the same riding path, and what's nice about that riding path is that a good portion of it is shaded. I see people riding from Archer to Gainesville on that one, and there's not a lick of shade.
It'd be 100 degrees.
And I think about how much, someone's going to die out there. But I also think about however many hundreds of thousands of dollars that costs, and I never see more than 3 people on it, and I think it's because there's not a lick of shade. It doesn't seem like a pleasurable ride to me at all. Right.
You gotta have some comfort.
I think it's a lot of validity to that.
So when I think about landscapes, or sidewalks, is it wide enough? Is it far enough? And is there some landscaping around it that also makes me feel that's the small town also? Like,
I love that in Tioga. We walk back there, my oldest daughter and I will walk, and their landscaping is amazing. Not like
On
flowers and
8th
things,
Avenue,
but
it's
it's greenery
beautiful.
and it's shaded. And even though the highway is right there, it's only 35 miles an hour actually, but still, I don't notice them as much as.
Right.
So I didn't even think about that, Jordan. Is the landscaping makes a huge difference, because that's what we love about going to that back part of Tioga.
First thing in the morning or late in the evening.
Well, yeah. I'm
You
old
don't have
now,
any
so I don't
shade.
go in the middle of the day, but,
But that shade.
back in the day, I
gives you
would.
that access,
No. The landscaping makes a huge difference. I didn't think about that till you just said that. That's one reason we go there. It's so, it feels like the air's even better for some reason. I
it
don't
is,
know.
because the plants are clean,
pump
cooler.
in, they
Yeah.
pump in fresh
They
air.
pump in fresh air
into
just
Tioga.
for us. Yeah.
So one of yes, to all of these things, on the flip side of that, we talk about, for example, that the infill spot where we're talking about putting in sidewalks all the way around the neighborhood, like the
Right
small
by the-
lots. But I remember there being a whole lot of concern about it because the sidewalks, while offering safety, are also in proximity to trees that could either mess up the sidewalk or mess up the tree. So how do we balance that in planning for this? Like planning for that shade, planning for that landscaping. I mean, we're gonna have to plant trees, 40 feet, 50 feet away from the sidewalk so that there's no.
Easier to do when you're starting the neighborhood from scratch.
Right.
Harder to do when you're in an old neighborhood.
Retrofitting.
So, but again, I think my guiding principle in all these conversations is I don't want to be pigeonholed. I don't want to be locked in. I want to have the freedom for each development that comes to take these guiding principles and say, and here's how I'm going to address these guiding principles.
Right.
And then this board has the freedom, because so many times we get, and we say, well, that's not what we're doing here right now, right? This is the code, they meet the code. you don't really have a reason to say no because they meet the code, right?
Right.
I want to get out of that and not necessarily want to say no, but I want to say we have the ability to say, well, you're in the historic district, you can do this, right? Let's be a little more flexible.
Thank you, that was valuable input. I think we've talked about the one-way pairs. Stop me if you need to. I think we've covered a lot of the transportation and the housing in our conversations. If there is something that, sparks you,
I would add golf cart on that.
I was thinking golf cart.
golf
too.
cart, okay.
I think in Newberry, golf carts are,
From over
Yeah.
by the park to.
You should put on side by sides too, not just golf.
I think Newberry's more of a golf cart than we
I don't
are
know,
biking.
Jordan.
You know.
There's quite a few of us that have those side by sides.
That might be
Yeah.
because we don't have the bikeability. Like, I bought a bike so I could ride it downtown, and I never do.
AC I've seen.
There is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Goodness gracious.
Saw some of those at Halloween.
All right, very good. And then for housing, so I'll just try to go back. So this is a land use pattern, as I mentioned before, along the major thoroughfares, you got commercial, and then everything else behind it is low density. Really would like to see some mixed use, some higher density, and then obviously still, viable options for a commercial type development. And then looking specifically at multifamily, so the RMF1, which is in maybe one or two places in the city, RMF2, which I couldn't find any record of application within the city, and then the CBD being the only zoning districts that permit multifamily type development. So one recommendation is to look at the zoning districts and maybe provide more variety of housing types within the different zoning districts. So with that, if there are any other ideas on diversifying housing stock or increasing the core downtown density, I'll conclude.
Well.
So, but that is.
Mr. Chair, I said, one of the things that staff has talked for years extensively about is, and you've already touched on it, in terms of creating opportunities to increase residential density in the downtown area. If there's two things in my mind that support the revitalization of a downtown, the success of a downtown, it's that you have people who live in the downtown and that you have authenticity in the downtown. By authenticity, I guess what I'm saying is it's not loaded with chain stores, national brands, and things like that. It's got your Main Street suites. It's got, your capricious type restaurants. It's got your shops, local shops and things. We only have a little bit of that right now. But I think one of the things that we suffer from is we have a lot of opportunities for infill that have been passed over because of the expense to extend water or sewer, or those kind of things. Our code prevents a higher density in the downtown area right now. And so changing the code, we've talked about maybe doing an overlay district in the downtown area that allows that small scale mixed use where you've got, a prime example is the application the Bounds have turned in to do their new building right on Newberry Road. It's going to be retail, commercial downstairs, but it's going to be apartments upstairs. Perfect example of the kind of thing that can, over time, contribute to the revitalization and success of your downtown. And so, ideas for getting more people to live in a denser area downtown. That's one of the things I think we do suffer from is our downtown residential area is very relative to relative to urban densities that support a downtown spread out. You've got a lot larger lot sizes and undeveloped lots and things that could be utilized. And so,
Brian, remind me, because this speaks to the diversity of housing stock, but we have some areas around the schools that you still have 2, 3, 4 acre lots, and you have a manufactured home in the middle. And there was at one point, I can't remember who it was now, but there was somebody who wanted to come in and buy up 2 or 3 of those, take out the manufactured home and put in apartments or something, and we didn't allow that, right? Like, you could only come back in with one house, and there's not enough money there for an investor to buy up 3 lots to just build 3 houses, right? They need the density. So I think that's what we talk about. We talk about diversifying what is allowed to create that higher density. But then you got to deal with the people across the street who say, well, hey, I moved into single-family neighborhood, and I wanted to be single-family neighborhood. So we've got to balance. We go back to that word balance again.
Right.
But what I would love, and I know it's getting late, but I would love to get this board and the commission thinking about how are we standing in our own way to accomplish things. So we had tonight the very first subdivision that I think I've ever seen that was 5-acre lots. Those are very rare. But I found out that we have a rule that says if you want to create a 5-acre lot neighborhood, you have to pave the road. So I think that there's a whole lot of people who have 20, 30 acres that may be willing to, subdivide that up into 5 acres, but they can't afford $1 million paved road to go in. And so we're not seeing that. And again, to the idea of phasing in, even inside our urban service area, and encouraging the small estate like Barrington and Lexington, encouraging the 5 acres, I think we may have rules in place that disincentivize, is that right? Yeah, disincentivize people from doing that because, hey, you've made it so hard, the only way I can make money is on 1/4-acre lots, right? I can't make any money on 5-acre lots, so there may be a market out there for them, but I can't put $1 million road in. This is the first one I can remember doing that. So there may be ways that we can balance that out, get out of our own way, create that density inside. The infill, I think, is really important, right? The more that we can get people in the downtown, the more those people will visit the historic downtown.
Yep.
But I think we have some rules that are preventing some of that from happening.
And Mr. Martu, I think there's a bit of a stigma on what's considered multifamily housing. In most downtown, successful downtowns, densely populated downtowns, you have a mix anywhere from a lot of the single family's gone away because they'll chop it up into duplexes or triplexes or something. But I think we need to get away from the idea that a single family residence is incompatible with a quad. There's really no incompatibility on small scale multifamily mixed in with single-family residences, but there's a perception, I think, that there is. And
well, this was the issue that just blew up in Gainesville 6 months ago, right? They were trying to allow pretty much, if you had a lot, you could do anything you wanted to with it. So but there has to be some sort of balance in between anything goes, and we do offer some diversity.
Right.
Right.
And I think a variety, that's why I like the accessory dwelling units. It's a garage apartment or, a little cottage in the back. You hardly know it's there. It's another, individual or small family that might be utilizing that unit. Brings in additional income for that property owner. But it increasing the number of units within downtown, I'm going to avoid using that word density, doesn't mean you're plopping little apartment complexes everywhere within the downtown. They could be achieved in more subtle ways.
Do we have any more slides?
No, sir.
That's
I
enough.
conclude.
All right. And so you're going to sleep on, we're all going to sleep on the single zoning package. We're going to come back, maybe have that as an update.
Yeah.
And you're going to take all of these comments back. And I would, are you coming back to the P&Z? Your next stop is the commission?
My next stop's the city commission, but we're always open for feedback.
But when we have a draft, that draft will come back to the P&Z?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Will this include, when we come back, will it include the increasing the density in the downtown area? Because that's something I would like to revisit, not tonight, but I'm very interested in hearing.
Have we done
possible?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll just have to get the planner speak translated into the layman speak so that we know all the different parts of the comp plan that speak to this, because what they were going to bring back is going to be like in a different language, right? Jordan will get it.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like, and this is more of a question for staff as a whole, if we could give a little bit more ample time for for us to review the comp plan, the draft at least, just to kind of take a look at it versus what we normally get, just because
Yeah.
I'm a slow reader.
It'll be, well,
So.
and it'll be dense.
Yeah. Well, and I think that staff needs to hear us say that it's okay to send it to us in draft, right? We get that it's a draft, it's a working document, but it is nice to not have to try to do all of this in 48 hours.
Yeah.
Understood. You know, so if we can say big cross draft, right? Working to it, and we can give comments back, and you can come back and say, yeah, we're changing that, we know that, or hey, that's good, right? We'll bring that in. But it is dense, and I can't remember the last time we looked at the comp plan. It's taken many, many years to get back to this willingness to do this, so I appreciate you guys putting in the extra hours and the work. But this, you know, we did the charter 6 years ago, and like I say, it's charter and then it's comp plan. Those are your two largest, most important guiding documents, and we're now in the midst of going back and looking at these standards. So I think we've probably had it for tonight.
Yeah.
Any last comments?
No, I just want to share my appreciation for all of you, your feedback. It's really valuable for us to understand where you're coming from.
I agree, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep, it is a big one. Any final comments, Madam Laura?
I just wondered, has there ever been a workshop specifically for downtown? Does that predate me?
In our series of visioning workshops, we did separate out the town, and those happened about 2 years ago, and I think we had about 6 of them. And we did look at downtown. We asked specific questions. That was right in the middle of COVID. So we had some that were virtual. We had some, we did send out surveys to everybody. We had really good response on the surveys. And then when we did the CRA is larger than downtown, but we did focus on the downtown at that point in time. A lot of workshops happened with the two-way pairs that were focused on the downtown. So I'm not sure that we ever specifically said, we're only talking about the downtown, but there have been lots of times that we have over the last 6 to 8 years where we've said, okay, this is cutting through the downtown. How do we see the downtown? How is that going to work? The CRA specifically, because we are envisioning a lot of that money coming back into the historic downtown to beautify and those kinds of things.
I'm just curious because I think it would be valuable to hear from businesses, developers and whatnot, what would make it a viable option to build and create in downtown. For us to hear, as well as we know kind of what we want to see as well, like making those two things mesh together.
Well, one of the steps that we're taking right now is that the CRA is funding a stormwater master plan, because one of the limiting factors is there's very little place for stormwater to go. And it's not fair to ask Bounds to spend $200,000 up front, then the next guy gets to come in for free. So what we were looking at is creating some sort of stormwater assessment. We'll have a master plan for the downtown, but it's those kinds of infrastructure improvements that residents can't see, because generally that all happens underneath the ground. It's not a new building going up. But I hear all the time people say, well, you put the cart before the horse, you're not planning. And I can tell you, these guys, they're planning all the time, right? You know, FDOT's been planning for the two-way pairs for 9 years at this point in time, right? It just takes so long to do it well, to do it right. But they have plans on top of plans, and they're all in a different stage. But it's those kinds of things that once we can address that, I think you'll see more. It's a snowball effect. Any more comments, Ms. Kathy? Closing comments? Closing comments, Jordan?
I just wanted to say 2 things. One, I think Brian is absolutely correct. I think the city of Newberry, we need to realize we can accomplish what we want while having an open mind and willing to come to the table. So I just want to remind everybody of that I think that we all can get what we want out of Newberry and still have an open mind and grow this city the way we want it to. Secondly, it's been a while since I know I missed the last meeting. I just want to say that I cannot be more proud to be in the city of Newberry. I think we have excellent staff at the city level, and I think they do a superb job, and they don't get enough credit. So for those of you here, I appreciate what you do, and I thank you for what you do, because I can't tell you how frustrating it is talking to other city members, city staff members in other cities, and then appreciating when you come back home. So I thank you.
I appreciate you saying that. I say similar things all the time. We take for granted how good our team here is. I travel to all the other cities, and I see exactly.
From somebody who works in the federal government, I appreciate what goes on here in the city of Newberry. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Long? Ms. Urchin? I have no final comments as well. I appreciate all your time as we embark on this massive journey. We are. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
Public comment. Public comment. We ain't gonna say we're not adjourned yet. Yeah. Come on down. Come on. No, don't apologize. We're here for you.
And you've heard this multiple times, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but if somehow you guys could build in, and it doesn't have to be for every single proposed development, maybe there's a threshold for the number of homes or number of impacted residents, but there needs to be some kind of a mandated requirement for the developer to have a community meeting with the impacted residents. That doesn't exist right now, and I'll tell you full disclosure, the Westone development, the 850 homes west of town, that borders my western property line. We have tried at great lengths, starting when that first was read here, to have a meeting with them. Chris Potts with JB Pro stood here and said, I'll hand him my business card, we'll meet anytime, anywhere. Over the course of many months, including the mayor, thank you for weighing in to help facilitate a meeting. It was nothing. They didn't respond. They even asked for questions ahead of time to help facilitate. We provided that. I met with 12 neighbors on my porch. We came up with questions, and we were totally disregarded. So, again, this isn't a, broad brush on every single development, but I think there could be a sliding scale that you need to hold these folks accountable to meet with the residents, I think, and hear their concerns, maybe meet halfway. And I think in the long term, that helps the process when they come back for a second or third reading. Maybe they've tweaked a couple of things because of the meeting that they had with the property owners. So that's my piece. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. And Brian, before we adjourn, would something like that be in the comp plan? Would something like that be in an LDR? Would that be a policy? Would that be a resolution? What kind of?
It's, Mr. Mayor, it's something we could add to the LDR requirements, so we sort of have a checklist. If somebody wants to do a rezoning, here's the steps. And right now, we don't have a requirement for a neighborhood meeting prior to a pre-development neighborhood meeting. Could be added into the LDR as easy enough, for certain types of processes.
Okay. All right. Another thing to think on, sleep on. Any final comments? We are adjourned.